live. Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast, episode 175. This week we have breeder Steve.
Hi there.
He is the first person to write about aquaponic cannabis growing and creator of many different wonderful strains, including the first strain that I ever got featured in a publication, which was back in High Times in their first article on aquaponic cannabis they did on us, which was Island Sweet Skunk, which was, man, such a wonderful strain. So it'd be really awesome to have you back on the show and talk with you.
Thanks, man. It's nice to be back. Very kind.
And we also have Mr. Green Jeans.
Hey everybody. Also, I'm a huge fan of Island Sweet Skunk and your work, breeder Steve. Humongous fan. You're easily one of our biggest, most important guests we've had on the podcast.
Oh, that's too much, man. You guys are kind. The Island Sweet Skunk is actually one downstream from the original Sweet Skunk, and that was from another seed company. I can't remember. It was either Federation or Next
Federation.
Yeah, that's right.
Federation.
That's right. But I think a lot of the clone that went around as it was the original mom that I gave those guys earlier on. When I met them, they were growing some garbage and they were working at a grocery store, and I came and brought them a good cutting of everything, and 6 months later they've got a seed company, you know. So anyway, that's sometimes the way it goes, right? But that's whatever. The Island Sweet Skunk is not exactly the same as the Sweet Skunk, but the cutting is often used interchangeably, I think. So
I have a really nice male that I use that's 25% Island Sweet Skunk. He's got a lot more than 25% of my favorite traits. I wish I had been able to breed directly to your original Sweet Skunk.
Well, it's still around. It's still around.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great news.
And we also have
and thank you for clearing up the story
yeah, no worries,
about that
no worries.
And all that.
We also have Roger from ILGM.
How y'all doing this week? Yeah, and I've never smoked Island Sweet Skunk, but I've heard so much about it. It's kind of like what the Congo was just sharing with you guys a minute ago. Yeah, I would really like to try some myself. Yep, for sure.
Try them side by side. I had recently a friend brought me diamonds and sauce of both, and I had them in a couple of small jars. And whenever people came over, I would always be like, check these 2 jars. I wouldn't say which is which, and I'd be like, check these 2 jars and tell me which one you like better. And like 10 out of 10 people preferred the Sweet Skunk to the Congo, but I'd always show them the Congo first because they'd be like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And then as soon as they check the Sweet Skunk, they're like, okay, but what's this? This is really, they would just totally just next level it, you know? It's just really, it was a lucky find, that particular one, for sure.
That Sweet Skunk has such a caramely sweet flavor to it. On the back end, it has just like this almost like nougaty taste to it on the back end. It's so good.
It's a fun one, you know. It's got so many aromas that
leaves the most amazing smell in the air.
That's right. No, whether it's fresh or burning, it smells great. People, it always stands out in a world of kush, right? In a world of kush and cookies. When you light up one of those, everybody's like, what the hell is that? You know?
Absolutely.
So what quota style. That's neat. That's the coolest thing to see, is when you've made crosses and made selections out of it. And that one, I never even tried to breed it true. It was when I'd crossed an NL haze with a grapefruit in '95. I grew out 500 of the F1 seeds, and 498 of them looked like Northern Lights, and 2 of them looked more haze-like. And there was, of the 2, I liked one just a little bit better than the other. And then that cutting, I just shared with people and just said, you know what, if you enjoy smoking as much as I do, grow it, and I'll give you 6 cuttings, and just promise me everybody that you meet that likes it, you'll give them 6 cuttings. and let's get it out there, you know? So now I get it back from people all the time. A friend literally gave me an ounce of diamonds and sauce of it about a month ago, and I've probably smoked a gram a day, so it's almost gone, but it was delicious. But not smoked it, but dabbed it, you know? It was so, so tasty. It's actually what I've got sitting in front of me right now, too. It's such an intense aroma that's all its own, you know? It's really special. And it was a recessive plant, and I wasn't worried about making seed of it. I said, let's just get this clone out there because it's so special. And you can grow it 11 weeks, you can grow it 14 weeks. It's really up to you, but you can do it in spears, sea of green with no branches, and you just have cricket bat after cricket bat. They're just beautiful. They're so easy to go that way. Even though you may let it go 12 weeks, it still yields twice what 2 8-week one would, you know, or what an 8-week one would. So it was always special, you know, and that plant goes back a long ways. So to think that it's still around and still appreciated just warms my heart, man, for sure.
Awesome. So what have you been up to? It's been, I guess, about a year or so since we had you on last. I think last time we had
That's right.
still down in Colombia, and there was quite a bit of time zone difference the last time.
That's right. No, I do recall chatting with you guys, and I was sitting outside, and the crickets were being loud. Yeah, it
So,
was.
So what have you been up to? I'm sure you've gotten a lot of growing done since then, and got a chance to play with a lot of stuff. What have you been up to?
Well, we're just working through everything we get our hands on, and but production has just got underway, and we're filling up the first title, which will be in total we have 889 hectares there, and there's maybe 800 and something plantable, not quite the full amount, but most of it. There's over 800 plantable. And that's a lot of hectares at 2.5 acres per hectare, right? So just getting that first property filled up is the priority right now. And then we're starting a second one up towards near Santa Marta, in a really nice region, really ground zero for where the best Santa Marta gold came from. And I've visited and looked through that area for the last 3+ years, and we've got the best sites identified there, I'm certain. So I'm pretty excited to get that. To be restoring original Santa Marta gold, going through all the versions of it that are left out there, and some of them are truer than others, because I really remember what the original one was like. I was lucky enough to get a chance to grow it towards the end of when it used to be around. And I made Tropical Treat 1 and 2 with it, crossing it down with Sweet Tooth and Shishkaberry. And then with Dutch Treat and that NL Hayes was Tropical Treat 1 and 2. And then I made Tropicana 1 and 2, crossing those lines with Shishkaberry and Sweet Tooth. And but of course that diluted it dramatically, and because when I first grew it out, it was 16 weeks flowering and pencil thin buds, and I wouldn't share them with my best friends. They were just like cherry pie. They were just absolutely phenomenal, and they stayed in a jar on my bedside table when I smoked those by myself. You know, they were so good, but I'd never seen it quite the same again. And when I had it even crossed down as the Tropical Treats growing out in a selection crop in Switzerland, I remember when Sam the Skunk Man came by, and he walked into the selection room, and there was lots and lots of different nice things there, but he immediately pointed to the back and said, "You've got Colombian gold." And he just beeline for it. He's like, "I haven't seen this in ages." And I said, "Actually, that's crossed down once, you know?" And he was like, "Oh, really? Do you still have the pure ones?" And I said, "No, I thought nobody'd want something that was 16 weeks, but it was so special it had to get added to something, you know?" And then I kicked myself for not keeping pure lines of that, because that was really the nicest version of Colombian gold I ever had my hands on. But since then, I found some pretty close, and I think with a few more generations in situ, we'll have no trouble restoring it to its original glory, if not better, you know. And that's the only way to do it is really where it came from and where it developed. So it's, to me, that's like bringing Pinot Noir back to Burgundy or something. If you can do it, if you can really get the true character back. If they'd ripped out all the vines in Burgundy and you had to grow Pinot Noir from seed to find the old cuttings, you know, that would be the equivalent, you know. So it's really, that's a fun project I'm excited about. And then we're pushing forward with some licenses in Peru and Mexico, hopefully Ecuador, and we've got the process started in Portugal and Spain. So there's a great crew I've got working on the admin and all that. And I love doing design briefs and of what the project's going to look like as far as the logistics of the propagation, what the goals are of the breeding program, right, for the production that we want to do from there, and also designing novel extraction, you know, so having fun with it on a soil to oil scale, right? And to be able to do it at scale to try and make it the most affordable you can is important. And we've got to green this planet up one way or the other. And I'd rather see it covered in sweet skunk or something, you know? So it would be just an ongoing dream to do it, you know? When you know, they say when you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier today on the phone for, we ended up talking for, I don't know, 30 minutes or so today. It was really nice and refreshing to talk to somebody else doing similar kind of things, and just some of the different stuff that you've been running into is similar to what we've been running into, or you had already run into it there, and it was just kind of funny, you know.
Well, the regs are the hard part, as you guys know. So in any jurisdiction, and this is where it's the most frustrating for me, because when I went to Switzerland originally, it was legal like tomatoes. So you didn't need a license. There was no THC limit. There was a guidance on that hemp should be under 0.3 or whatever, but it wasn't a law that it had to be. You could grow, they straight up said, we don't make any plants illegal because Swiss botanicals are such a big thing. We want the opportunity for everybody to explore any plant they want. And as long as they're not selling it as a narcotic, it's not a problem. You know, so there's no hash bars like Amsterdam, but there was fields of, you know, white rhino growing beside the train tracks for 10 minutes while you're on the train. You know, it was pretty funny. It was wide open production, but consumption was behind closed doors. So it was, but it was, if you went to a mainstream supermarket where they sold the Dusty Millers and tomatoes and peppers and everything, they had trays of every kind of cannabis on the market at the time, whether it was hemp or, you know, our favorite. And it had the little plant tags with a photo on it, and it said finishes mid-October, plant in full sun, good drainage, water regularly, you know, just like you were buying a tomato flat, you know. It was just so normal and nobody gave a shit. So it was so refreshing. And so it got there and you're just sort of like, oh my God, I stepped into this alternate reality, which is the way it's supposed to be. And of course that didn't last, but it was good for a while. And but it was so good to see it work that it just was a non-issue really. And it was the Swiss way of thumbing their nose at the neighbors too, where cannabis was highly illegal and very expensive, because they would all let their, you know, university kids would all go out to grandpa's farm and plant a few hectares, and they'd, you know, sell it to their friends from neighboring countries, right? Who would come and get it and take the risk of taking it away. So they know the Swiss are all about importing money. You know, they hold a third of the world's money because it's, you know, anybody can bring any amount of money there. It's not a question. It's not a, you don't have to tick a box when you land. You can fly a private plane in loaded with bullion. You're good to go. And they know, they just accept people showing up with money. So the Swiss let the people grow weed, but they said, hey, we're not Amsterdam. There's no hash bars. You can't sell joints. So they could sell weed and they could sell bongs, but they couldn't pack a bong and sell a hit, you know? So what, right? So it was really just a Wild West there for a while. And to think it was like, well, eventually it'll be like this everywhere. And, you know, the trafficking aspect of it for smuggling of that will die off because it'll be like this everywhere. And it'll just be a non-issue because here the people just don't care. They're all really introverted and they just think about their own lives. And if they don't use cannabis, well, they don't really care if you do because they don't care what you do. You know, they just care what they're doing. That's a great way to be. So it's quite amusing to see, though. And of course, I know when it came in Canada, I was like, I'm sure it's not going to start out like that. And of course, it's heavily regulated here. And in most places, it's regulated to the point it kind of sucks the life out of it for a lot of people, I think, you know.
I know. I've thoroughly given up on California. You know, you couldn't pay me enough money to go do a project in California. Period.
Is that right? Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the regs there, but I've heard a lot of people grumbling about it.
Oh yeah, well, so they you can't have backup generators for your entire facility, only for life support systems. You know, for the aquaponics would be about as far as we could get for that. And then they shut the power off all the time. You have all these fires and everything else, and then they harass you, and they have ever changing laws. They're seeing. There's a whole new article I was just reading about how they're if people are filing in standard instead of metric, they're not renewing their licenses as far as reporting, and like all kinds of just completely asinine, you know, not at all legitimate, you know, excuses for taking people's licenses. And you know, we had a wink and a nod, and hey, you should, you know, apply for a license because we'll give you one, you know, hush hush, allegedly from a city council out there, and then they turn around and change their mind on the day of the vote because half the Catholic Church and half the Catholics in the entire Bay showed up to the meeting on the day of the vote, you know, and all kinds of other. There is no sanity to the market out there. So
no, it's, you know what, it is. I think what appealed, you know, everybody that was into growing, well, I can't say everybody, you can't generalize anyway, but a lot of people that were into growing pot over the years were counterculture people that like not to be attached to the system too much, you know, and it's a bit of a painful transition because it's amplified in the legalization paradigm, you know, like it's worse than just opening, you know, a car repair shop or something, right? The licensing and all that, whatever other business you could think of, there's not too many that come close to the hassles of running a cannabis business in this day and age. And
not to mention, like, if you're not compliant, it's not a small deal. Like you go to jail or they raid your
that's
place.
right. No, but and when it really they really should have modeled it like wineries. If they had to do anything with it, like obviously it's not as harmful as alcohol, but if they had to do anything with it, at least don't make it more punitive than wineries, you know? And wineries have a lot of reporting requirements and the grapes to wine and all that. And you're manufacturing alcohol. They want to know how much you're making and where it's going and track it in that fashion. But that all exists, you know, and it's not reinventing the wheel. They don't have to view this as like a uranium-like substance. It's really benign, like echinacea, well, another cannabinoid-bearing plant, right? So you think if they regulated it no more than echinacea, you know, it's like you're organic or you're not. After that, nobody gives a fuck how many you plant, how many acres you plant. If you want to breed it, you know, you could be a hobby breeder of echinacea. You can't possibly be a hobby breeder with the regs in Canada or most places. I mean, Canada in most provinces, but not all, allows 4 plants without a license. And that's just new. And in Colombia, they've had 20 plant allowance for a lot longer, but still 20 plants, you're not a breed, you can't do hobby breeding. I see no reason why, if I want to plant 100,000 seeds and narrow it down to my favorite 3, anybody should care. Like, it just pains me that they treat it like a hazardous material when really it's just a beautiful flower. I really strongly feel that anybody that thinks otherwise can kiss my fucking ass, you know?
And you make some really good wine. I've actually had the pleasure of being invited to have some of your wine with
We
you.
did share a nice bottle
yes.
together, didn't we? 1 or 2 even.
Yeah, on 420 we had
That's right. That
the
was
evening.
awesome. No, I've really enjoyed making wine. I made wine for 15 years now, and grow the grapes and make the wine. It has been really a lot of fun, and definitely more good than bad. There's always, you're always going to have a few fuck ups, but we've had definitely more than our share of exceptional ones, and that's been a real treat. But I've actually just got out of doing that and sold my wine property, so I'm just back 100% on cannabis right now.
Oh, okay.
But I kept 2 pallets of wine from the last 15 years, so my cellar's full for a while. We'll drink another one.
Oh man, that wine was super, super good, and that definitely was a fun evening.
You've got excellent taste.
So what are you working on? Or is there anything in particular you're excited or you're really honed in on in particular with your current breeding projects? I know you touched on a few earlier, but is there anything kind of
we were chatting off the show earlier. We were talking about trying to get some CBDV lines up and starting with Lebanese starting material. So that's really at a very starting point. We'll see what we end up with, but that's going to be a neat one to get up, because it's not going to be as restricted if you keep the THC low in it. So that'll be interesting, I think.
So why would someone be interested in growing CBDV, for instance?
I have heard a lot of different reasons, and I can't verify any of them. But the most intriguing that made me laugh my ass off was it's supposed to be the female Viagra. When I heard that, I was like, whether it's true or not, we're going to have to make some CBDV. This is hilarious.
I think we need to come together as a community and make sure we help the ladies out for sure.
You got to get that up to 33 as fast as possible for sure.
Oh man, what are some of the others? I know there's right now, especially with the new USDA regulations, everyone's kind of in a panic. Are you working with any CBG lineages right now? What are some of the ones?
I'm not. I know some people that are, and I've talked to a few about getting some seeds, but I haven't started at all with CBG. I'm just excited to get the fields of THC cranking. To me, that's just my favorite. And I think that's what the world needs. And I don't know enough about the other ones to have enough of an opinion. They're all valid and interesting, but I love THC, and I don't care who knows it, there's everybody and their brothers doing CBD these days, and I think you have to differentiate yourself. And even on my farm, we've got CBD there too. But we're the only company in Colombia that's actually got a quota to produce THC oil for export so far. And our first client country is our partners in Brazil. So we are leading the pack as far as regulatory stuff down there and getting these sorts of achievements. It's been I can't even tell you how many lawyers this takes to run to run the legal operation down there. It's, to me, after 3 and a bit years of getting it going, I'm a little fed up with the situation. It's getting better, but it's so slow. And in Canada, when they have an election and the government changes over, they don't change all the bureaucrats. But I understand in the US, that's how they do it, where all the bureaucrats change with the political party. And Colombia, that's how they do it too. So when there was an election there, shortly after the first, government had made the medical cannabis regulations, The next government came in that was a little more opposed to it, and they took their sweet time getting people on the files to pass the licenses, and even worse, the quotas. So they have a system of quotas in Colombia whereby plants that exceed 1% THC CBN combined are considered psychoactive. Anything under that is hemp and doesn't require security. So if you've got high security, you need the quotas for the anything over that 1%. So they drag ass and thought of every excuse not to give it to you. And one time they even refused to give it to us because they give it to us for R&D first ask, but when we asked to commercially produce the THC, they were really giving us blowback, and a lot of it was nonsensical, and we got to the point of we were going to sue the government kind of thing, and they ended up conceding it to us eventually. So now we have that first one, but it was a fucking struggle, and it took like way long. We should have had it in January. We didn't have it till August or something, right? Like it screwed you out of a year of commercial production. Because down there, I've got it set up that we plant, harvest, and process every day of the year. So it's not like you have a season that you do it. We just do it every day. And so if you can put in a hectare a day or 2 hectares a day, and you can harvest 1 or 2 hectares a day, well, you've got a cycle going, right? So we switched over to non-psychoactives to keep filling the land up, but we still had the psychoactive, but we were really held back on producing it. We just had like, you know, our gene bank with the little 4-inch pots of all the different mums or whatever. And then so when you get the bloody quota, then you've got to grow those into mums, take cuttings, make more mums, take cuttings, you know, and multiply them until you can fill the area needed for the quota. So if you've got, say you need to make 5 kilos of oil and you need 50 kilos of dry flour for that, and you get 100 grams of plant or whatever, then you just work out the math, and that's what they give you. You hope they give you, but they might give you something totally different. They'll say like, well, it's taken us 6 months to give you the quota, so now you're not going to produce as much this year. So we've cut it back, and you just, oh God. I'm so tired of that, you know, and the quota system may kill Colombia for psychoactive production. And if the place gets overrun with hemp, you can kiss all the good varieties goodbye, because it'll be sad, really, you know. And
South Africa is proposing a quota-based system as well, and it's like, dude,
fight
what
it.
are you doing?
Fight it. It's such a waste. Canada doesn't do quotas. Canada's far from perfect, but at least it doesn't do quotas. In Canada, you get the licensed canopy area, and you track how many plants you need to keep it growing, and you know what you've done. You've got to have all the records of how many clones you took and numbered, and go all through the process. But you don't get permission. Like, okay, now you can plant 500 more. Now you can plant 500 more. You know, or okay, I say I want to plant 100,000 seeds this month, and they're like, well, you know, you can't sell it. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I'm going to thin them out, thin them out, thin them out, and I'm going to end up with some good stuff. And whatever I make from that, the last 100 plants or whatever, we're allowed to donate. R&D production can go to the universities for their trials with medical patients. So we're working on topicals for arthritis, basically, right? And that's all going through university in Bogota. So we can give them the free medicines. And the more R&D crops I do, the more free medicine I get to give away. I've got no problem with that. I just really want, I'd grow the R&D crops if I had to burn them. It just seems like a waste, you know? So to me, it's fun. We get to run the extraction equipment and make some of this and that and get it out there. But the fact that you have these quotas, they delay you constantly. And they just make what should be, the reason I'm there is for the efficiency of production on the equator, and it's not efficient with the quota system. So it really, it does take the shine off the area. And we're talking with the governments in Peru and Ecuador and trying to help them get it right. And northern Peru, even at the equator itself, and Ecuador, of course, is on the equator. Colombia's got competition if anybody makes better regs and treats the companies better. And I say that as the company that's been able to go the furthest, You know, we've plowed the field for the people coming behind us, and that's good. But still, we've had to work ourselves to the bone to get anything past them before other people will get a chance to follow up with that. So I really feel like we're crushing ahead for everybody. But I may pull out because if I can get a better situation next door, I will happily redirect investment on mega projects there. And I'll be building oil refineries next door for if they just don't do quotas. If they just say, okay, you licensed your 2,000 acres, go to work. That's what I need. If you license me for 2,000 acres and then say, okay, you can plant 1,000 plants this month, fuck you. Well, I can't work like that, you know? So I'm getting really tired of the bureaucracy, and I'm sure it's not going to get better wherever I go. But the thing is, at least you have some leverage if you're playing with more than one country, because you can say, look at, I'm about to spend $100 million building a fucking oil refinery here. It's going to be a massive generator for you. Like in Colombia, they're taking a 17% cannabis tax, not including all the other benefits and taxes they're getting, but the overall economy's getting from all this investment and job creation. I mean, we've got people planting clones where their dads used to plant landmines. You know, it's totally, you're taking back the country for the people to do something righteous, and they make it difficult for you. Like, what good is that? You know, if you don't, at some point when you don't appreciate what's being put on the table, it's going to be gone. And we're looking at the one refinery, which isn't even the extraction plant, but we'd have a couple extraction plants to feed the one refinery, and it would have an output of 10 tons of distillate an hour. So if they were getting a 17% tax on that at wholesale, are they not insane to make my life difficult? You know, they're just shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, no, and it's like they did something very similar too. Remember when Jamaica legalized, and then they copy and pasted Oregon's bill, and it's like, you know, how are you going to ask these guys who have been growing cannabis for, you know, 150 years on some of these plots, that, and tell them that they need to be 1,500 feet from a road, and they need to have cameras on their grow 24 hours a day, and they need to have a razor wire fence around their grow. Like,
Yeah.
dude, we have to be realistic here. We need to balance what's
Yeah.
going to help your economy there with the international standards for cleanliness and testing, and make sure that we can meet both of those goals. You can't
That's
copy
it.
and paste
That's all it
these
comes down to. If the product tests clean, period, that's it. You're passed. That's enough. And
Exactly.
when they put all these overbearing regs, they just keep the price up. And what they need to do is just allow it to grow like corn. Nobody steals, you know, very few people steal corn, let's say. It's because it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous and it's cheap. And I don't see why a 12-inch bud doesn't need to be any more than a cob of corn. You know?
No, absolutely. Especially at the scale that you're doing, and working with so many different cultivars, and you know, do you want to touch on that? Because I know you were just working on the million seed search when we had talked to you before. How did that
That's
work
right.
out?
You know what? I haven't grown out I've only grown out a tiny, tiny bit of the seeds I've received from that million seed search. And it's been a godsend. I really, really appreciate all the contributors and the offer stands they get to come and visit when I get the whole thing planted. Because right now from that million seed search, I have like a Rubbermaid of seeds from all over the world. And I'm waiting to get I hadn't even applied because we'd had to shift gears to CBD for a bit while we were delayed on this THC thing. But now we're back in a headspace to do more THC R&D. So the million seed search is shortly to have a quota, I believe, and we will get everything that's been sent planted at the same time. They'll be vegged for say 8 weeks, and then they will go out to flower, at which point I will allow the contributors to know that, hey, make plans to come down here in 6 weeks, because in 6, 7 weeks, you're going to see this whole field in flower, you know? and see the whole million seed search in person, because I really want to, from that and other things, I want to really keep a living library of cannabis. The idea is, and again, the quotas have interfered with this, but as I get them more and more on side and more understanding of what we're trying to do, they're coming around. So it's a process, but it's, and it's painful, but I'm trying my best. I really think that it'll happen sooner than later. Probably they'll get planted before Christmas, and in the new year, everybody that's contributed seeds to the Million Seed Search is welcome to come down and check it out. Either way, they're getting a full grow report and lab report on their stuff and how it turned out there. And we have agronomists making notes and taking pictures every week of everything that we try out. So they'll get a really professional feedback from that location. And when I try those things again, the things that I keep for trying in other locations there, they'll get the reports from those as well. And they come down to visit, I'm sure they'll have a souvenir or two or something special. Because of really sorting through everything. We've got the stuff from all over Australia, all over India, a few parts of Africa, a number of Asian ones, and of course, loads and loads of modern stuff from North America and Europe. Got a few different Mexican ones. I mean, there's still ones I don't have, and there's lots I would like to. I mean, I'd like to just look at everything everywhere I can. I'm not too worried about trying Hawaiians in BC outside, but I'd like to see all the Hawaiians growing out in Colombia. I've got a few Hawaiians, but I hardly have a complete selection, right? And but it's just a blast to see it. Whether anything ever gets developed with all of them is another story. It may or may not. I'll probably not use too much for what we're using for production, but we will select from the best of that to make what we need for the different lines, like the Lebanese for the CBDV or the Malawi Zamal crosses for the THCV. We want to try and make sure we're doing some little bit more niche work in the breeding side, so we have chemovars that aren't the same ones everybody else is doing, especially if we're going to really be making them at scale. Like, you've all seen CBD really totally become commoditized, and it's really just the tip of the iceberg still, and it's cheap like borscht, right? Whereas you have CBN is going for 10 times the price of THC, and I can use the one rotovap and some household stuff. I can make THC into CBN in under 2 hours.
Right.
So I mean, in the lab, I like to play with things that way. But the highest seed I've got in CBN, which I was a big surprise to me because I wasn't expecting to get high CBN varieties. I just always thought it was an oxidative product of THC. But I've got some Pakistani that is like over 9% CBN. So I thought that was a big surprise for me this year anyway.
Okay, that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Oh, there's
yeah, I was writing that down. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, remind me what CBN is good for too.
CBN's the sleepy time one, and it's the one that's gonna combat the opioid crisis, if you will, because it's really the one that just makes you melt and relax. And that's why people like the Lebanese red oil and the Lebanese red hash, because their export grade was the old stuff they couldn't sell. So all the good stuff is blonde in Lebanon, and then the old stuff turns red, and then they export it. But it's soothing. It's not so much in your head; it's more in your body, right? So it feels like a massage from the inside out, and it puts you to sleep. It's really relaxing. I really like CBN. I actually purposefully quickly oxidize a certain amount of THC I have so that I always have some CBN around, because I really enjoy it. And I know lots of people probably think that's nuts, but to me, I'm just a little nutty about cannabis. So.
To me, the one thing I would say is be careful if you're making edible products that you really get the dosage right, It definitely has the potential for abuse, and I think that that's one of the few things that scares me, and it's one of the few cannabinoids, I guess, that to me really it needs to be in a more of a controlled setting, or you know, at least with some kind of warning, because
That's weird. That's the first I've heard that. That's interesting.
oh, so we did a concentrated sublingual version of it, and we dosed each other, and all of us slept for at least 16 or 18 hours straight, and you could do whatever you wanted to that person. So the potential for abuse is high, and that's the one that I could see getting regulated immediately.
Oh, okay. So it's the new roofie, the can of roofie.
Well,
Exactly.
I thought it was funny that
So,
it's CBN, so like N for narcotic, and then you're talking about it.
well,
Yeah,
so-
truly, it's the most narcotic of the cannabinoids in that fashion.
CBN,
but if you're in a cannabis, in a hospital setting or a doctor setting,
Oh shit, in your living room, it's okay. It's not. It's,
oh yeah, exactly.
You can dab it, dude. You can dab it. Don't worry. You can dab it at home.
Oh, absolutely. You totally can. I'm just saying more so when you're getting into edible products.
Yeah, no, that's right. Anytime you get into edibles, you got to be extra careful with dosage, because it's no quick come down. You take a dab, no matter what, you're going to get over it in 15 minutes. But
yeah, but I think of all the ones that's going to get regulated, I could see that one getting regulated first.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that. That's totally a good point.
But I also think, compared to other options for anesthesia and for keeping people comfortable in a hospital setting, it doesn't have respiratory interactions. It doesn't have kidney issues. It doesn't have, it does have some interactions with liver stuff depending on other medications, but generally compared to the safety of other, especially any other anesthesias, it's a hell of a lot safer in that regard, as far as even on the off chance you overdose somebody, so he sleeps for 12 more hours, no big deal, right? Like
yeah
yeah,
no,
like you said, in a controlled
as long
setting.
as you're in a good safe place, that you're fine with it, but yeah,
So we got
edibles
Vision.
change the equation, that's for sure.
We got
Right, good
Vision
point.
here, joined us.
Vision, all right.
Evening, Steve. How are you doing,
How are you,
buddy?
buddy?
Hey,
Good
baby.
to hear
I'm
you.
good.
Good to hear
Cheers.
you.
I'm drinking a little bit of red wine. It's not made by me, but I'm sure your season is in full flow.
Yeah, man, I just took it all down, actually. Yeah, and I'm having
I
some
know.
red wine myself. I've got a 07 Brunello de Montalcino on the go tonight.
Don't say things like that to me. I'm just going to get so jealous. It's ridiculous.
I don't. You'll have to just get back for a visit, man. It's been too long.
So what what are some of the different?
I know, dude. I love coming to your place.
Oh, must be a lag.
No, go ahead. I didn't realize he was lagging there.
That's my lag.
No
I
worries.
gotta say, buddy, you're not getting any better looking.
I'm getting old, dude. Like
Hey, that's why I don't
Give
even
me that
see me.
shit.
You won't even see me, man. It's too ugly.
I know. Yeah, I'm gonna drop my video out because I got a unstable internet connection, but so we'll, which will just make
Save some bandwidth there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not problem with the bandwidth. Oh.
So
It's just
so whatever some of the trends you found, I guess while he's working out his technicals there, with the international scene, I guess, especially, given the kind of crazy stuff going on last week with the USDA, which we'll get to in a little bit. What are some of the other trends and some of the other stuff that's kind of going on in the international scene? You have kind of a better perspective than most people.
Well, I keep an eye on it more than most people, but I know people that keep an eye on it more than me too. But I think the nice thing is you're seeing it open up more and more and more, and the dominoes are starting to fall, albeit slowly. But you're starting to see, I can't even tell you the number of places people have been telling me this year, oh, we can get something started here in Cambodia or Malta or God knows, Poland or Denmark. I've been invited to do 10 times more than I'll do, because I don't know, you just can't do everything. You know, it'd be nice to try and get around to see everything, but I'm trying to maybe narrow it down to 5 or 6 places, no more. You know, I maybe have some satellite places with trusted partners doing things there, but personally, I'm not going to micromanage even 6 places. But you know, a lot of the stuff is clonable, like the operations and the SOPs and designs, and that you can recycle a lot of that. Once you've got that right in one place, it's a lot easier to reproduce it in another one, right? So that's good, but often there's a slightly different angle of attack to each project. Some of them are going to be more hand, some of them are going to be more mechanical. I'm leaning really to trying to move everything to the mechanized version, and I know that's not going to be the case with selection crops and that, of course, but for actual production, I really just want to see everything going out with seed drills and coming down with combines, and then processing it into silos of terps and oils, you know.
So, Steve, can I ask you a couple of questions?
By all means.
So, like, I've been watching the med can thing down in Colombia for a little while, and I watch all the photos and stuff like that. So, how are you vegging your plants?
Well, right now we're pretty standard cuttings. Once they're rooted, they get moved to the juvenile area for 6 weeks, and they're all in cocoa with bokashi and compost. It's totally bio operation. So once they've vegged for 6 weeks, you take 2 cuttings off the bottom and then stick them in the field, you know. So you could really exponentially multiply.
Yeah, technically you're on the equator, so everything's just like
like
12,
3 and a half
time,
degrees.
Yeah.
In a year, I have 6 minutes variation off 12-12.
Ooh, oh, the big boys.
Yeah, so it's virtually 12-12 the whole time.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm just like,
so you can plant, harvest, and process every day of the year.
But when you're doing that en masse, you know, it's just I was just inquiring about like how, you know, how you must have a light regimen that you're maintaining, you know, them under.
We started out with we have outdoor mother blocks, as you've seen in the pictures.
Mhm.
So we've got outdoor mother blocks, and we've got outdoor or shade cloth veg areas for the juveniles. And those lights originally would be on the full 12 hours that it would have been dark. So they were getting 24 hours light. And then we cut it back to, I think we just give them 6 hours supplemental now and keep them at 18.
Yeah. Everybody needs a rest.
Yeah, you know what? It works for a while, but you start seeing some plant stress after it's 24 for too long.
Yeah.
But the thing was, we were doing 24 because a lot of the stuff that we were trying from northern, you know, further higher latitudes, it would start to flower on 18. You had too many things that were auto. So you try 24, and then still you'd see which ones were really auto on 24.
Wow.
So like, okay, so what's your take on autos?
Well, I don't have a lot of experience with modern autos. I've never been really impressed with most of the ones I've seen, but I had one sweet tooth one this year that was I would call it a sweet tooth 6th generation, and that sweet tooth 6, there was most of them weren't autos, but there was a couple that were from a few hundred seeds, and 2 of them were quite nice that were autos, and one of them was green and one of them was purple red, and the purple red one was insanely grape lollipop. It was one of my favorite sweet tooth expressions, is when it smells like where the grape lollipops come from, and that auto sweet tooth totally had it. And under 24 hours light, it was almost entirely budded and full of resin and total candy smell. So I found a matching auto purple male and a matching green auto male, And I took those 4 plants out of the main selection greenhouse and put them in their own spot. So I kept a little jar of seeds out of those plants, and I'm looking forward to.
Were they in a pot or in the ground?
In a pot. They were just in pots. They were in small pots, and like 1 gallons or something still.
Okay, so like, do you think that's a root restriction gene or an auto
Well,
gene?
it may have contributed to it, but if there's like 400 seedlings and only 2 of them are flowering, it's pretty obvious, you know, that those ones are inclined to go off early.
Yeah. I'm just curious, asking questions.
Yeah, no, that's what I was seeing. But I actually did grow out some of the green line of it, and they're pretty good, but not exceptional. But I haven't grown out the other line of it yet, the purple red ones, which I'm just going to call the purple line from now on to keep it clear. But the purple line, I'm more excited to grow out because it had the ultra candy. Both of them had a real sweetness to it. And the green one I had out in my garden this summer. Now that we're allowed 4 plants here, you know, I did 4 monsters this summer. I got like 10 pounds from the 4 plants I had in my yard. And
Sweet.
yeah, but they came down 3 weeks earlier than usual. And where I am is too far north for these varieties. So they would do good in southwestern Ontario, but they suck in BC, you know? So if I grow again commercially in Canada, it'll be in southwestern Ontario. But I still, wherever I am, I'm going to put out some just for fun, right? So in BC, those 4 plants, we had an exceptionally early deep cold. And then there was some more rain after that. And then it was getting sunny for a bit, so they got another week. But they went down to well below freezing 3 times about a month before I'd usually cut them. So a week or 2 later, you know, they were surprisingly resilient from the freezing, didn't take them down. But one of them, you know, it was neat to see actually, because one of them was very white. The fan leaves of it were much thinner and they disintegrated. So you had to really strip that out or it would have been rotting everywhere when it started raining the next week, right? But the sweet tooth in particular had the thicker leaves that were more elastic and they held together. You couldn't even tell they got cold, you know. But there was a couple other ones there that showed it to varying degrees. Even the sweet tooth, on a few spots on the plant, you saw some frostbite on them for sure. But when I saw they had a few more days of sun, and then I saw 3 straight days of rain coming, and I cut them like an hour before the first drop fell, and it was good because it didn't stop for 3 days, and I would have lost most of it. So I was really happy to get it down. But as bud, it's not stunning, but it's going to make lots of tasty bubble hash for me. The dry sift version.
Sweet. Okay, so I'll give you so like this was like a really bad season, like middle of September, BC, it starts to rain and then it just doesn't stop raining for 3 weeks. Okay, so
you're out on the coast, totally different.
I know.
I didn't. My September was pretty good. That wasn't my problem.
No, ours was appalling. But okay, so we had this ex-Canadian soldier pass through in the spring, and then he turned up again later on. But in the spring, he'd given us seeds he'd got from some field near Kandahar in 2006 when he was doing his tours of duty. And but he was a toker. So he went like, holy shit, these plants are fucking huge. I want the seeds from this. And so like he very kindly gave me, like, what have I got now? 26 seeds of that. So we grew just a couple of them out just to have a look-see, because I don't believe everybody who says anything to me. So we grew up, and those things went through that 3 weeks of complete, utter trash, rain, cold, horribleness. And there's never been a single spot of botrytis on any of those plants. So, and I had, they were right next door to my Congos. Okay, my Congos melted. My Congos are usually completely impervious to bud rot, but they melted. But this thing did not melt. Okay, so that's it's like following White Buffalo Seeds guys who are really trying to like weed out the powdery mildew strains.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a strain that we can actually use, which will just eliminate bud rot. So you can actually keep them going outside,
Well,
even in the.
You know what's weird about the powdery mildew? Everyone talks about this, and so there's actually quite a few studies on the gene that actually is responsible for that powdery mildew resistance. It's very similar in corn and soybeans and other crops, right? And there's actually some really cool studies on that particular one on minimum thresholds regarding parts per million of silica in the soil, and then how if your silica thresholds, your bioavailability of your silica is below certain thresholds, the gene expression for particularly powdery mildew and a couple of others, but that one in particular is one of the main ones that really stands out as far as being triggered or not triggered, because of a minimum threshold on which I believe was right around 60 parts per million.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, I'd have to do some digging, but I could find you the link on that if you're curious. There's we talked about this too. Well, I'll let you go back to what you're talking about too. But there's a really cool weird one about we talked about the cassava CRISPR-9 virus with the cassava mosaic virus, which is similar to cannabis mosaic virus, and 45% of the virus learned how to use CRISPR to kill the plant faster.
Oh, frightening.
Absolutely.
Definitely genetically, you can see some plants have more resistance than others given the same conditions, but but I'm sure what you make available to them, like a healthy plant is always a resistant plant, but still certain ones just seem to have, they're either mildew magnets, I call them, or they really repel it. And it's amazing to see the difference. So sometimes you learn things in ways you don't want to, but you still learn something. And one time in Switzerland, when we were getting going, there was a stressful transition time where there was no power. That the power building got shut off as partners were changing over and this sort of thing. So I literally took all my selection plants I had going in the warehouse for a week into a cave on the side of a mountain and put a generator in there with 1,000 watt to keep them going. And the cave was full of mildew, and everything I took in there except 2 plants that looked like everything got hit. Everything was totally fucked except 2 plants. And they just looked like they were never left the warehouse. They just were cardboard. The leaves were like green cardboard. And that was the mother of Sweet Tooth 4, BX2M1, and the father of Sweet Tooth 3 and 4, BX2P1. Those 2 Sweet Tooths had that evergreen look to them, big fat leaves that they didn't take mildew. They just wouldn't take it. They had brothers and sisters all around them, but that thinned them out. I was like, oh, no need to pick any further. These 2 are the winners, It was, just one of those things where you're like, oh, everything's going to shit. And a week later, you're grinning from ear to ear because you're like, I never would have stuck everything in that room in a box of mildew, But because I did, I saw which ones didn't mind, It was pretty crazy.
Some of the greatest discoveries in the world happened by accident.
Yeah, that's it. So you always got to look for the silver lining too. And a week later, the power was on, and I was cleaning up the plants back at saving what I needed to. But those 2, I was like, I never would have known that you guys are special, Yeah, that was crazy.
Well, it's better than growing in a swimming pool in the back of Shaughnessy somewhere.
Were you at that place? Did you ever visit me there?
Yeah, I was there, dude.
Yeah, I thought so.
That was one of the first times I ever got my eyes opened up to what everybody was doing, and I went, holy shit!
Dude, but not everybody was doing it.
Not everyone was doing it, no. But it opened my eyes to what, you think you can actually get away with this?
That was epic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm glad you saw that, man. I'm glad you saw that. That was epic, for sure.
That was it. No, that was that. Those were epic times, dude. And people were trying to get away with absolute murder in Vancouver. Like
Yeah,
the
this was
murder is not
mid
murder,
90s
murder. It's just-
Vancouver, and I had a big old house that had been condemned, I think, at one point. A sweet ass deal with a foreign landlord, cash deal, no name on anything. I loaded it up. I had like 3 rooms with 14 lights in the basement, and then the backyard I do 1,500 plants around my swimming pool. Then I drained the swimming pool, filled it up with plants. The whole backyard was full, and it was halfway between the airport and downtown. And helicopters would take people from the airport to downtown, and they would fly down to show them my backyard like a tourist attraction. And I would wave at them while I was watering the plants, and sometimes I'd give them the finger because they'd get too low and start blowing plants over. And it was just epic. It was so funny. And we had a house band that came and played parties at that place. We called it the Compound. Like that was a scene unto itself.
Steve, what was Jolly Rancher? What was actually in it? Do you remember?
That's a good question. That was my very first seed I donated to Emery after he'd got busted. I'd never thought of even selling seeds before. I'd made them for myself because back then you couldn't reliably get anything. You had to save your own. So we had started growing for 5 years in the summer in Ontario. Last couple of years I had a couple of closets or something in university, but mainly I would grow my stash in the summer. And the last year I had made some seeds from one that the mother I believe was ironweed, which was I think out of California at some point, but obviously probably from Mexico and further on. But the ironweed was quite strong, and that was the mother. It wasn't sweet at all. It was really like almost metallic, and the father was a really bubblegummy male I found, but I didn't know for sure what it was. I just knew it was, more, let's say, wide-leafed, because I can't say indica anymore, but it was, you know what I mean? It was a little fatter mama, fatter popo there with, and it had a real bubblegummy and a fruity bubblegummy smell to it, even as a male, and I was like, I don't want to just kill this for nothing. I want to hit something with it. So I hit it with this one I called ironweed, which was strong enough that it was worth growing. But I don't remember. I can't even remember where the mother came from. I'm sure it was as seed. Anyways, that was what I started, what I called the Jolly Rancher, and then I was growing that out. I used to call it Medway Madness because I was from London, Ontario, and I grew in Medway Creek. And I called it Medway Madness. But when I moved to Vancouver and I was donating a jar after Emery got busted selling seeds, because I knew him from London, like loosely, not closely. But I just said, oh man, so you got busted selling seeds. If you're going to do it anymore, I'm happy to donate you a film canister of seeds. And I remember him peeling the top off, looking at him, and he says, they're fucking coconuts. They were huge. Like usually you get like 1,600, 2,000 small seeds maybe in a film canister. You have to be old enough to remember what a film canister is, but those ones there was maybe 600 or something. They were just like small peas or something. They were big seeds. But I remember growing them out in Vancouver a few times, and I moved on from them pretty quickly, but there was always a few people that were so attached to it. And I still hear back from people that were like, what was that Jolly Rancher all about? That was my favorite thing. What happened to that?
That was my favorite fucking thing, dude.
Really? You're one of those too. Okay, so now I feel bad I let it go. I just gave up on it after a while. I got more interested in other things I had and let it fall by the wayside. It wasn't like I hated it. It was
sweet sugar candy. Probably you probably hated it because it's probably too sweet for your taste, but we loved it because it was like that side tongue sweetness. Was fucking
totally. When I grew it out in Vancouver,
it was fucking outrageous.
It reminded me of the Jolly Rancher candies. Like it had the fruity and the sour tangy
and the side hit of the sugar. Yeah, it was just like
I thought that's a better name because I said who in Vancouver nobody knows Medway Madness, and that was just my own name for it. Nobody ever knew it like that, but but yeah, I thought, what does it remind me of? It reminds me of Jolly Ranchers, you know.
So
that was how it got its name.
I'm very curious because I don't get to fucking like hang out and do these things online with you that often, like never.
Well, you could
So,
give me
like,
a call any day of the week, though. You know.
No, dude,
that.
I've got your number on speed dial. Don't worry about it. Okay, but so like I think, and this would be really interesting for all the people who are probably watching or listening, who are going to watch or listen. How do you make your male selections?
You know what? Mostly through rubbing stocks. It's really, for me, a sensory thing. I really, you know, the very basic premise of this whole project is like begets alike, right? So if there's anything I don't like about the smell of a male, I'm hesitant to use it. And if I really like it, I find a way to use it. And sometimes it's even smoking the male, you know, but rarely, only once or twice, honestly. But a couple of times I've had male buds that I thought, that I am saving the top of that and smoking it, you know. And it was.
Have you ever reversed a male into a female to try out to see if it's better or less?
I never have. I didn't play a lot with reversals. I never released feminized seeds, as you know.
I know.
I'm not opposed to it in any way, shape, or form. It just wasn't my whole thing was, you know, just avoiding hermaphrodites like the plague. You know, that was really the fundamental for me. If I could see anything herm or sex change, I wouldn't use it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's me clapping, by the way.
No, I just stayed away from it. I saw it happening all around me, and I was like, I'm really fascinated, but y'all tell me how it goes. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, you know, which is avoiding hermaphrodism like the plague. So I don't regret that in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying I would never do feminized. I'm sure I will. And I will do not only feminized, but feminized sterile plants.
What do you mean by sterile?
They won't take a seed. So even if everybody around you is growing hemp, you will still be growing seedless plants.
Yeah, no, I think that's our, you know, because the US legalized hemp. I think like hemp's fairly legal in Canada at the moment. And I think that like anybody who's going to be doing big outdoor is going to get some very seeded crops because like
already this year in Ontario, there was a lot of reports of the first, not everyone, but some of the first crops were heavily seeded from hemp.
The Spanish used to put up weather maps of when the male flowers were going off in Morocco.
Yeah, the Moroccan
pollen would fly over, you know, and everybody would get like streaming noses because there was just like masses and masses.
I was in Spain when I saw pollen reports come out where 90% of the pollen was cannabis.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, of course.
Yeah, it was like in August, all the pollen's flowing up from Morocco, But still, I saw lots of seedless pots. So I mean, even when there's that much pollen in the air, it's not like being beside a male. You know, you have to be fairly close to males to get a density of seeds. You know, you might get a sporadic one from random pollen from far away, but it's highly unlikely. Like it's like getting, I don't know. I don't even know what to compare it to. It's such a remote possibility of getting seeded. I've had males in fields where you had tons of seed in every plant within 10 feet. And then you had a few seeds in plants within, say, 30 feet. And then you had seedless plants.
Yeah.
So I don't worry too much about, you know, foreign males pollinating us, but if you have a field down the street, you're gonna have a problem, you know.
That's good info to share. I like that you just shared that for people out there that are always so concerned. But I'm also glad that you're on the job doing the sterile thing. So if it does become an issue, you're gonna
no, that's it. That's the future of it right now. I think it's the greatest thing to happen to cannabis genetics since cannabis.
So how does that
the fact that you can keep your pot seedless forever, and there's two types of sterile female plants. So if you think of seedless grapes or seedless watermelons, they're stenocarpy plants. They're stenocarpic. but the process with them leaves these little aborted white pips. So that it would be unacceptable in cannabis. It's not good to just have little white seeds. It's not really an improvement, right? So the virgin fruit is parthenocarpic fruit, and that doesn't take a seed. And I first found those in the mid 90s. And I had 50% sterile and 50% non-sterile, just regular females. And that was out of this mother of what I call tight skunk. So the same father as sweet skunk got hit, or it hit these ones that were called Ryan's Killer. And it was from a grower out in the valley named Ryan in Abbotsford or somewhere in the Fraser Valley, I forget. But so this Ryan's Killer, when it came out, I had a friend that was selling eighths of bud, and she usually sold eighths of bud for $40. And when this came out, she was selling, it was like twice a year she got this batch of Ryan's Killer, and she sold it for $55 an eighth. So it was just unheard of in Vancouver, a $55 eighth. So just because she had them, and she's like, honestly, try it. Here, have a little bowl. It's delicious. And she said, and he said, anybody that gets it lucky because there's some special seeds in it. I never met the grower, so it was just this girl that trimmed for him, and it was selling some bud. And he had this batch he'd been working on. It was unlike anything else flavor-wise. It was more like sandalwood. It was really a unique herb. And when I grew it out, it had vine-like stalks, so it looked like a Oaxacan, and it had florets in the petioles, again looked like Oaxacan. So I was guessing maybe it was a Oaxacan Afghan cross or something, but I'm sure the guy was working on making feminized seeds, but just trying a few. And in amongst my friends that got an eighth, probably 3 or 4 of us said, well, we're getting an eighth or whatever to try this. And we all put the seeds together, and there was like 6 seeds, and I grew out the 6 seeds. All 6 were female, and 50% of them were sterile. And you know how you could tell the difference? They had no pistils. The other 3 had pistils, and they made seeds. And they were side by side with the mother of the sweet skunk, grapefruit, getting slapped with the same pollen. And 3 of them chock full of seeds. The other 3, not a single seed. You just couldn't seed them. I was smearing it on by hand. You know, you couldn't seed the plants with no pistils. And then later, a secondary thing that I noticed about them that was really different, and that I learned later because I spent a long time researching this phenomena. And other parthenocarpic fruits often exhibit the same trait in that they root really, really abnormally quickly as cuttings. And when I took cuttings of these ones, the sisters with hairs, they take 10, 12 days like everything else. And the ones with no pistils, they rooted in 3, 4 days. So I was really blown away by these plants, and they were strong. Like, they were good. You wouldn't turn it down for anything. It was good bud, you know, it was really strong, good selection that he'd done this with, but I hadn't made them. I only grew them out. And, but I thought back and I studied the phenomena repeated, you know, on and off for ages. And now I know what's going on. And I'm working on the patent for it right now. So that's hopefully going to be done, I would hope, in the next 6 months, but we'll see.
Now, how,
Go
ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Where do you think we're all going in the next year? What do you think is going to actually happen? Like legalization wise and all the bits and pieces that we're going through at the moment. Me, I'm just trying to get a goddamn fucking like craft cannabis thing together. And in Canada, that's a fucking nightmare.
No, I know it's really discouraging how hard they've made it, but I do believe they're going to peel back the layers, and they have since the beginning. Like when I saw the MMAR came out, I was like, no, 300 plants, I'm not taking it. And then you know, tell them where I live, no way. And then I saw the MMPR come out, it's like, okay, they want you to build a prison to grow pot, and they want to limit the effectiveness of it by making you sell it crunchy dry and lower THC and blah, blah, blah. They had all these ridiculous regs when I read the first round of the MMPR, and I said, no thanks. And then the ACMPR came out, and it's like, okay, now it's getting a little better, but still, it's still overblown. And now they've come out with the micro licenses, and you thought, yeah, but they're so small. And the fact that you couldn't do farm gate direct sales made it a no-brainer not to do it for me, because at that point you were locked into either selling it directly to the province or to one of your larger competitors, which is being caught between a rock and a hard place, right? So I said,
No,
that's no way to run a business. I realize now that's getting tossed, and they're going to allow farm gate. Yeah, they're gonna allow farm gate sooner than later, and that's gonna change it for the micros. It'll be worth people's while if they can do direct sales, but if they have to go through 2 layers of bureaucracy to sell it through other people, it's probably gonna be destroyed by the time it gets to people. But people don't want that. They want it to be like a winery where they go to the place, they meet the people that make it, they see the plants, they taste the stuff, you know, make it fun. Doesn't have to be sterile, you know. They all want to do the sterile. They want to make it all into Tylenol, and it's like, hey, there's a place for that, but that's not what it's all about, you know. So let's have some fun with it and just get over it, you know. It's just grass.
Dude, and you're the greatest example I know. Okay, and because you sell wine. Totally legal and logistically, and do your shit because you say this is the taste, this is my wine, this is my alcohol, this is my buzz. Essentially, it's your buzz. So you're selling them your buzz, and your buzz, and anybody else out there, you better go and buy his wine because it's fucking awesome. Okay, but you're one of the few people I know who's gone through like the whole proportion of like a prohibition and being a complete abject little fucking pirate in the beginning to coming out of that and having a winery and still and you got the place in Colombia, dude. Like, you know, dude, like I've got to give you a fucking round of applause. I'm sorry, I've got to give you a fucking round.
You're very kind, man. But for the record, I no longer have the winery. I ditched it a week ago.
You ditched it a week ago?
I sold it a week ago, so I'm straight into cannabis again.
Dude, you did the best ice wine known to mankind. Okay. Your ice wine was like God just cried on your tongue. It was.
And I'm glad you tried some. And the best ones I labeled Sweet Tooth Series, right? Yeah. The best ones were all. If you looked on the back label, they were called Sweet Tooth Series.
Oh no,
it was beautiful. The people that got to enjoy it and visit that place had a lot of fun for sure. That was nice.
We had a question from chat. They asked in chat, if the plants are sterile, how do you breed them? And can you cross that into other stuff, you know, with other strains, or do you have to stay within that lineage?
Well, they're mainly designed for you just to take cuttings as long as you want. But if you want to breed with them, you'd have to do reversals with them. And then you could probably cross it with something, but it will never take a seed.
Right. The whole point is it's not breedable. That's the whole point.
Well, it's not even a question of it not being breedable. I don't care if you can cross it with something by reversing it and cross it with something. Do what you want, but the plant itself is a cutting, you know, that's going to be a cutting as long as you use it. And it may come out micro propagated in artificial seeds, like desiccated artificial seeds that have a wax coating so that they'll flow through a seed drill and can be used for field planting. But this is still in trials and away from commercial release, but not that far away, like maybe a year or two. Who knows? The fact is, it's being able to use a cutting that won't get seeded. And even in Canada with the indoor licensed producers and greenhouses, tons of them have taken shit for selling seeded bud. and even worse, seeded pre-rolls. And the one reviewer in Canada, he called out the same producer twice, different months apart on different batches. And he cut open the joints and weighed them, and they're 50% seeds. And
Ouch!
Brown
Ouch!
finished seeds. But can you
Ouch!
imagine a joint that was 50% seeds? And they're selling these joints for $15 a gram. It's like, how can you get up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror? You know,
I
these
just
people
got
are
handed.
so incompetent. So I thought, and it's not a question of their neighbors with males. These guys are indoors in the freaking winter. You know, like there's nobody growing around them. They're having Hermy issues, and they're testing out seeds with males in the same facility or whatnot. But they're getting complete seeds. There's absolutely no excuse to sell smoking cannabis with seeds in it. That's just insane, right? And
it's an insult. It's a fucking insult.
I love seeded bud,
insult,
but I'm a hash smoker, so I love seeded bud. The seeded bud doesn't bother me. One of the things I loved about seed production was I always kept every resin gland I grew. You know, it's like I'm gonna get paid for this crop, but I'm keeping every resin gland I grow.
Yeah. Now I understand, because they're still resonated out on the outside, even if they got a seed in them.
You can't be a hash bean without an enormous amount of grass to crush up.
So why do you think the plant still produces a trichome, bulbous trichome with a fucking big sphere on the top, even after it's seeded? I always thought that the trichomes were there to protect the plant from UV light.
Oh, fuck. Well, why doesn't maple leaves have them then? Like, it doesn't. It's just what the plant makes. I think it's because Jeebus loves us.
Because Jesus loves us? Okay, I'll accept that one. I love Steve. He's funny.
So trichomes actually. Have you guys ever seen how like trichomes work in hops? So hops, when certain types of caterpillars eat the trichomes on hops, it actually changes their pheromones to be much more similar to the sex pheromones of the parasitic wasp that preys on them, and actually attracts a parasitic wasp via simulated sex hormones via consumption of the trichome head. It's one of the weirdest ones that I've seen, as far as ones they've actually documented thoroughly through. But it's so neat.
That's weird.
Yeah, I'd look that up sometime on YouTube or something.
When I get these caterpillars out of my underwear, I will.
little BT powder. Powder.
You just beware for the Lyme disease there, buddy.
Do you have any advice? We had someone else ask. They have some very old seeds from the 70s. Do you have any advice for germinating old seeds?
Well, the only two things I can think of is I would always put them, like, take some fine sandpaper and roll it inside a paper towel tube, and cap the ends with your hands or whatever, and just shake them back and forth to scratch them up a bit, and hopefully that softens the edges on them. Otherwise, you could literally sand the edges down a little bit because they get so woody. If you want to try it with a treatment, a lot of people use gibberellic acid, because that makes the sprouts just shoot out really quick. But I mean, you could take regular seed, put a little gibberellic. You don't need very much.
Can I add something into that, Steve?
Sure.
So, like, if you take a small half-liter mason jar, drill a hole in the top, and put a fucking air stone in there, bubble the water on the inside with a couple of drops of Super Thrive, then scuff the seed. Okay, because you still have to scuff the fucking seed, and then drop them in there. And as soon as you see that little like bonk come out, then you've got to take them out. Sorry, I'm completely anal about trying to start old seeds.
As you should be.
As I should be, because most of the seeds I get are fucking old shit. Anyway, so and that's how it really works. It's the bubbler jar. So as soon as that little triangle of white comes out of the fucking seed, it's getting like an insane amount of fucking oxygen, and it loves it.
Oh, that's smart.
And that's how to.
I was even
grow
thinking
old
peroxide
seeds.
too. If you, but there's less risk of overdoing it with a bubbler.
Yeah, there's weight, like I say, yeah, hydrogen peroxide. It may fry it, and we don't.
Yeah,
want to
no, it's
fry
a
it
question
as it
of dose
comes
for
out.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes. But once if they crack and the thing I've seen with old seeds often is even though you can get them to crack, they don't want to grow. So a little bit of gibberellic acid can make the tail sprout really quickly.
So what's
and you
a
probably
little?
take the shell off by hand.
Okay, so what's a little bit of gibberellic acid?
Oh fuck! I'd have to look at some notes. I think we were using very, very little, like 50 ppm or something like that.
Okay. None of it. We're just asking the fucking questions.
So I've had I wanted to chime in on that too. As far as the peroxide goes, it's 1 drop per whiskey glass. Is the
That's reasonable. Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah.
For
Is that a
3%?
shot glass or a whiskey glass?
Oh no, proper whiskey glass. We don't drink anything out of a shot glass. This is a proper
like a whiskey thistle.
Yeah,
whiskey thistle.
And then the other thing I've had a lot of luck with popping stuff that I've been given that were very old was taking and this was a trick I learned from some seed preservation friends of mine that do really old school like super old school stuff. So he actually has some pre-Civil War era okra seeds and some other funky stuff he gave me.
Oh, cool.
Up in Michigan.
I love growing okra. You know what? That's one of my favorite plants. It's so decorative as well as delicious.
It's
And
real good
the
fry.
flowers, they open up I forget the name of that, with the traditional camera with the shutter, how it's spiraled open there. What do they call that?
Like a shutter.
I don't remember.
You know, it's kind of like anyway.
Aperture.
I'm mixing up.
Yeah, how the aperture opens. That's like the flower on it unfurls like that. It looks awesome, and it closes up at night and opens up in the daytime, and it's a beautiful flower. It's like creamy white on the outside and kind of purple inside. I've been growing okra for years too. I just love it.
Yeah. So yeah. I was mixing up. It's actually was a different friend of mine that taught me it, but a different friend of mine gave me some of those in Michigan last year. But you can actually take those same germination hormones from corn and actually get corn, at your regular Home Depot or whatever, and or local seed place or wherever it is that's near you, and germinate those for 24 to 36 hours until that seed cracks open and that little tail pops out, and then immediately strain that water off. Make sure you oxygenate it, and then pour that into a fresh glass and put your cannabis seeds in that, and actually soak up the germination hormones from that.
All the enzymes and hormones out of that.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. And the other one that just popped into my brain that I forgot about that's really killer is coconut water. Like literally cut open a coconut, and a coconut is a giant seed, right? A coconut is a giant seed. And
coconut is a giant
real
seed.
Coconut,
yes.
It is loaded with everything that makes a seed sprout.
Yeah, I had never thought of that, but yeah, you could go to your grocery store and just go get some of that.
Cheap and easy.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's even better, man. And not only that, you can get a coconut in a whole lot of places in the world you couldn't get a germination hormone.
Fuck yeah. And one coconut will sprout a lot of seeds,
Oh yeah. No, man, that's such a good tip, especially for those guys. I know we've had a lot of people that listen in places that are a little more far flung. I know we even have a guy listen.
Yeah, they've got to learn to use what's available in the tropics locally. They don't have to order Clonex. You can use aloe vera. It's so good. The only thing I sprayed on my veg plants this year, my 4 outdoor plants, was a new aloe product somebody gave me to try, called Grow a Low, and it was to inhibit fungus and to help with any mites or aphids. And the guy that brought me the 4 mother plants that I put out May 11th, knee high, they were old mothers that had been pruned all winter, and they were already little shrubs. So they grew in the beast.
Those are the best fucking. Those are the best fucking ones, dude. They're so begging for the outside.
Oh yeah, they just are root bound in 3-gallon pots, and they need to go into a 3-foot deep hole chock full of wheelbarrow loads of compost. You know.
Yeah,
man.
But there were some spider mites I saw. I don't know if they came with them or if they came out of my cedars or whatever. But pretty soon they weren't taking over the plants. But I was seeing a few mites on it, which I rarely see outdoors in Canada. I've seen more problem with spider mites on the tropics because they never freeze, right? So there's spider mites outdoors are a problem. But in Canada, I've never, ever in my life had a problem with spider mites outside. And this year, I was like, I don't know if the plants came with them or not, but they had some mites on them after the first bit. And after 2 sprays of aloe, they were gone.
You had problems with mites outdoors this year?
Yeah.
Come on. You know, dude, I'm fucking living in the same goddamn province. So
no, but you're in a very different region. You're a lot moister. And where it's moist and cool, the predator bugs do better. And where it's hot and dry, the sapsuckers do better because they transpire quicker because they just suck liquid. They live off liquid. So if it's hot and dry, they transpire quicker and they reproduce quicker. And when it's cool and wet, the predators hunt better and conserve energy. So the cool, wet weather favors the predators over the spider mites, but hot, dry weather favors the mites. So I see it seasonally in the tropics, but even up here this year, I saw the mites outside, and I've never ever seen mites outside. But I'm thinking they probably came on the plants. But
do you have a pest management system for your place down in Colombia?
Yeah, we do a few things. We have a garlic pepper spray that we make, where we had one we were buying and then we started making. I haven't introduced the Grow a Low there, but I think I will, and I think I'm going to try and plant. The Grow a Low is made, there's only 2 varieties of the 300 aloes apparently that have this antifungal property. So I can't remember what the chemical is. I actually researched it and found it online because the company, of course, wasn't going to tell me, but there was actually a study from India or somewhere where they talked about it. Anyways, I haven't tried that down there, but there was the other ones we were getting were more microbial sprays. So
for the dirt?
For inhibiting fungal things. The fungal things were the main condition, you know. There was, we had some septoria issues in the last year, which I chalked up to CalMag deficiency in plants because the soil shit where we are. But always the plan was to dig a hole and put our own soil in it, like have post hole diggers behind tractors, digging the holes and making them so that they have X amount of liters for every X amount of weeks that they intend to be out there, right? So if they're mothers that you want to keep for 4 months, they need more soil in a bigger hole than something that's going to be out there for 6 weeks. So it's all based around how long they're going to be out there, how much soil they get. And the soil mix is quite complete. But if you give them a soil mix for 3 months, but you leave the plants for 6 months, they're trying to feed off soil that's like 5.2 or something, and they're not looking good, you know. So you've got to make sure that you've got the amount of, you know, custom soil that you need for the length of time those plants will be out. Because once they start getting a spot, if a plant's very healthy, you know, and we had this gardens there for almost 3 years and never seen it before. But we were always giving them a nice hole and taking them down. We weren't keeping mothers for a long time. And even in my SOPs, we were to replace the mothers every 4 months. But there was mothers that stayed out there because they looked nice and productive. And, you know, they looked like hedgerows with lights on them and trained up in trellising. And you've got acres of these mothers. And you're like, well, they're still cranking clones. So they're still cutting them. They're like, why cut the mothers down? But it's like the frog in the boiling water. You know, you start seeing a few problems, but it's not that bad at first, and then after a bit, wow, these are all showing this problem. So I'm like, how old are those? And how big is the hole? Fuck, they've passed their expiry date, you know. But I said, let's just test if the problem is a CalMag deficiency, which gets locked out at low pH. And sure enough, you just give them a little treatment with some CalMag, and boom, you could see immediately that that was the problem. And that's why it's nice to have some elements on hand for R&D, because even if I like to run everything organic, I still like to do science side by side, you know, and even if it's not for something that's for consumption, it's just to identify a problem, you know.
So Steve, I'm staring at the screen. Okay, and all it says is Steve Dale, which is great because I know what you look like, so I don't really need to look at you anymore. Okay, but I'm watching it. They're like all the questions coming down the right-hand side, the other side. But the reality is what you've just said is that, you know, we don't need to worry about that shit, you know. But people still need to, you know, and go and do a thing where, like, you know. Hang on a second, you and I both came out of a certain generation where we've grown the motherfucking load of weed. But at the same time, they oh no, it's not they can do anything they fucking well like to. But I'm just looking at the questions on the right hand side, sorry.
So so on the note of Septoria, I had only seen once before. And that was when it was directly next to a bunch of nightshades that also had Septoria, that I attributed to it coming in on. But I had seen that heavily in Oklahoma in particular. You know, if you look at how they had so much flooding areas and all that, it was sporulating everywhere in nature and getting all over.
Yeah,
and then
what
I've noticed, and the pattern that I've noticed was, you know, who got it and who didn't primarily. And we actually used a microbial treatment of a combination of Bacillus and Streptomyces treatments, one after another. And after 2 or 3 treatments, we were able to eliminate it. It wasn't a big deal if we caught it early. But
yeah,
what we
if you have a deficiency causing brown spots, it's apt to get it, you know.
Yep. But as
I
soon
told them, I said, we don't have a fungal problem, we got a deficiency problem, and the deficiency is inviting the fungal problem.
Yep. And so that was one thing, but I also saw it a lot in places that were corn or soybeans or wheat or stuff that has, you know, super over fertilized and has no biodiversity to those soil. These monocrop fields that have been the same thing for 30, 40, 50 years. Those were the guys that had the worst fusarium, the worst botrytis, the worst Septoria. Hands down, it was always those fields. You know, and I attributed at least part of that to the fact that how's this plant supposed to know how to have any kind of immune system if it doesn't have any kind of microbial exposure in the root system? You know, if there's no microbial biodiversity, of course it's not going to make any kind of terpenes because it doesn't know how to.
I have got these.
It's a matter of regeneration.
People in there now that are real, you know, all about it.
Yeah, like Steve was saying, the regenerating the soil, they hadn't done that yet.
And they know they're helping convert. Yeah, that's the key. There's one farm, a lot of the fields, not the ones we're planting on now, the ones we're planting on now were just, they hadn't been grown on in 20, 30 years, or maybe they had cattle, but they had a huge amount of brush on it that took a long time to clean up. And we dug a 3 million liter reservoir in the middle for aquaponics. But the, you know, aquaponics in the sense that it'll feed the greenhouse that way, which are mostly in soil. But I'm going to try some burnt bamboo as a medium too. I got some recently here in BC. Have any of you ever tried that?
No.
It's a medium that's supposed to be really good. So, friend that gave it, swear up and down. So I said, hey, we're going to.
What are we talking? Sorry, Steve. What are we talking about? I missed that.
Burning bamboo, I think, and wouldn't that be similar to biochar in a way?
Yeah, that would be that. That would be similar to biochar. But you can't burn bamboo. Like, bamboo's either going to go up in flames or it's not going to go up in flames.
The downside to the biochar type product. The downside is that it breaks down very quickly. It'll stay solid for about 6 months. and then it'll start to just come apart as the microbes start to break it down and break the bonds apart, and then it turns into basically like a loose perlite. And then if you have large plants, when especially if you grow it in more than 4 or 5 months, you get these large plants, and they have so much weight that previously was being supported by that media, that it actually will start to suck the plants down into the media, kind of like quicksand, as the with the weight of it, as the plant pushes down, it kind of just swallows the stalk. We had that happen at the lab at Aquaponic Source.
Well, I don't know how this stuff breaks down. I look forward to seeing it. I'm going to try it mixed with some cocoa, and I'm going to try it one on its own, and then try some cocoa beside it, and mix in some castings and the usual suspects. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. The jury's still out.
So on the note of diseases, have you seen any other stuff? I know we had talked a little bit on the phone about some funky viruses that I had seen in a couple of places this year, and there's some other, funky diseases that we're seeing for the first time. You're kind of growing at a pretty large scale on a bunch of different things. Are you seeing anything new or different?
I haven't seen anything new, and the closest thing being grown to us is pineapple that's 5 kilometers away, maybe. So it's just cattle between me and anybody growing anything, really. So it'll be interesting. But I really haven't seen much in the way of viruses.
Interesting. Cool. All right. Well, the only other thing I was going to say is, all right, actually, I think
Well,
we covered
you were
everything.
telling me some really interesting things about the viruses you've been finding, and you should expound on that.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I was sure. I've been visiting a whole bunch of different hemp grows and stuff like that, and in particular, visiting a couple different grows on multiple different trips up to Oregon. And there was one in particular, this Anheuser-Busch field that we stopped and looked at, and they had this weird leaf curl virus that is being attributed, according to the state of Oregon's cultivation department or agricultural department, is from it's a leaf curl virus from soybeans being transferred by leaf hoppers, which is how they figured all that out so quickly. I don't know, but I guess they have viral markers that they can check for pretty quickly with the DNA testing and stuff like that. But I have some really good documented pictures. Anyone that went to the Aquaponics Association conference panel saw those pictures. I'll make sure I'll do a video on it on my YouTube channel soon. But looking at different insect vectors, and then especially people that are growing directly next to monocrops, and monocrops that maybe don't have ultra stable seeds, that don't need to have ultra stable seeds, as far as corn and something like that's going to be much more stable than, say, soybeans or
soybeans are pretty stable.
Are they stable? What would be another one that maybe would be a little less so?
I don't know. Anything mass produced is pretty stable these days.
But well, so I know some of them do have some viruses and stuff like that in them. If you're growing your nightshade, a nightshade's
cackling about.
Oh, because you said you're totally right. Like most things these
absolutely.
days are completely, fucked up.
Well, tobacco and nightshades in particular, you can definitely transfer quite a few streak viruses. I know that I posted, there was a really great article a couple of weeks ago that we had talked about as well, about a lettuce chlorosis virus, and how that was being detected in some aquaponics facilities, that had that in there, and the fact that it can remain latent both through whitefly populations and potentially through aquaponic systems. So that if you're converting an aquaponic facility over from vegetables, it's something that you need to consider, and maybe consider doing lactobacillic acid treatment, similar to how they do it in soil with the dark horse genetics protocols that I know Alan spoke about a couple of weeks ago on the show. Using lactobacillic acid either from Grow Kashi or through Chris Trump's methodologies, or through the methodologies that we've talked about in other ways with the probiotics. All of those we don't know exactly which one actually is the one that helps with that, but we do know that generally that seems to reduce the viral expression, and that's documented through Dark Horse Genetics' research, and then furthermore through Kevin Jodry's stuff and work, and then also Alan's from Grow Kashi's work. So definitely check that stuff out if you're looking for more on that. But it's really kind of the only thing that I'm aware of, unless you know of something. And this is maybe a great question I'd like to ask you. Do you know of anything aside from that anybody could do if they happen to have a viroid that was, in a precious seed line or something like that? Do they need to hand it over to a lab to do tissue sampling and have them try to clean it up, or what would someone's options be?
That would be the only thing I could think of. Yeah, that seems
Good
like
question.
the go-to suggestion for sure. And the one thing I wanted to ask you, Steve, was you were telling me today a bit about the hemp thing in the States and asking me what I thought about it. I said I didn't know too much about it. And you filled me in a bit about the people not being able to use their seeds in case they've drifted over 0.3 combined THC and THCA. And I was mentioning this to my wife, who came up with a good point, and she said, well, in any other industry, when they change the regs on you, they give you time to use your existing stock.
There's a backstop. There's a
Right.
backstop where you just go like, well, we used to do it like this.
Well, yeah, but you can't do it forever, but you get to use up what you have.
That's like, but we always used to do it like this until this moment in time, and that's the backstop.
So I've spent quite a bit of time researching this because I wanted to come in informed and not misspeak. And there's a great article for people that want to be educated on this. Probably the best one that I've seen, hands down, is the one on OregonCBDseeds.com. Check out their blog. And it's called New USDA Rules Propose Significant Changes in the Hemp Industry. And I'll make sure I have the link in the description. Basically, they want to do testing 15 days prior to completion of harvest, which is completely insane. They want to take the top 2 inches of flower cut from each planted sample, which is not how the rule was written. If you look at the original USDA rules that were put out, where that 0.3% comes from, which they sourced in the article from 1976, that 0.3% delta 9 is from dry weight of young, vigorous leaves of relatively mature plants as a guide to discriminating two classes of plants. That is the exact quote. Here it is. It will be noted that we arbitrarily adopt a concentration of 0.3% delta 9 dry weight basis in young, vigorous leaves of relatively mature plants as guided by discriminating the two classes of plants. That's not 0.3% flower off the top of the plant.
No, that's leaves.
That's totally different. Okay. And that's how it's written. Okay. So the other crazy thing about it is, and this is the one that I think is even more insane that I haven't heard anyone, a procedure for testing using post-decarboxylation or other similarly reliable methodology, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration levels for hemp produced. So that would mean including potentially CBN as well. So if your plant at all tested over 0.3 in the whole life of the plant, it would be disqualified. And if you're over 0.5%, you could be prosecuted for negligence.
It's nutty. Why would you take the risk?
No one's going to grow it. Not when you're risking prosecution for hot seed.
I've got up to 27% according to some thinking people. Fuck them. Doesn't matter. Like Steve is one of the most amazing people in the entirety of the planet, and I've got to give him the fucking forelock tag, and I give him the forelock tag because he is like he is so old school, so smart, so like he is one of my mentors in my life.
Oh God, man, I'm blushing, man.
No, come on. You are, Steve, because I came here from England. I came here from England, and I got to meet you the first time at the swimming pool at the Shaughnessy fucking place. And I just went, what? And I just went, like, what? You can do this? and you told me when, yeah, you got the balls to do it. And I went, okay, fine, let's go.
So let me ask the $65 billion question. Is this the US government trying to enforce the purchase?
No, it's nothing to do with the US government at all.
No,
it's me and
hold
Steve
on.
having a fucking chat. Okay.
No. I mean the whole the reason for these limits, is this to enforce the quote unquote outrageous new strains that a lot of the GMO companies are wanting to put out and say, hey, well, we can meet these stringent requirements and guarantee it and be the only ones who can. And you know what? If you don't buy from us, you're actually risking prosecution.
You know what's going to happen, man? I'll tell you honestly, this is the truth, and this is sad but true. But we're dinosaurs and that we love the plants. But you know what? We don't get vitamin C for our kids. Doesn't come from plants. It comes from yeast or E. coli in tanks in China. You can buy a ton of vitamin C on Alibaba for $1,500 US. So when you can buy a ton of any cannabinoid GMO from China or here, it's going to be everywhere because you can raise these in tanks far cheaper than you can grow them and extract them from plants. So every one of these cannabinoids, a generation of people from now, forget it. If it's going to be medical or food, it's all going to come in. Already I'm seeing this. I've brokered some cannabinoids to a lab in the UK that the lab is one of, I think, 6 or 7 that are licensed API providers of CBD. The API is active pharmaceutical ingredient. So if you're a big pharmaceutical company and you want to buy CBD to add to a formulation, you have to get it from one of the licensed API providers. So with sending stuff into these guys, if it's 0.0, which most of the American stuff is, it doesn't necessarily pass there. It has to be 0.00. And even I get stuff for them now that's 0.000. 0.000. Yeah. So it has to have no detectable amounts at that level. And the stuff they were getting wasn't even 99.99 anything. It was like 70% and it was yellow. And I was like, where are you getting this from? And they said, China. There's no detectable THC in it because it's not raised in a plant with any THC. It's raised in a tank out of either yeast or E. coli and extracted from that. And yeah, there's no THC detectable in that stuff. So, hey, if your whole thing is purity, they can raise a molecule in another organism. It's frightening but true. And if you look at Flintstone vitamins, that's where they come from, you know? So if people give this to their kids now, the fact that we think it should come from that plant is almost immaterial to the greater world, you know? To them, a molecule is a molecule, you know? We're dinosaurs.
Steve, you're a fucking hero, dude.
It's
because like that's the same fucking opinion of fucking probably most of us. Hopefully.
Don't tell me that. I don't want to think that.
I know you don't want to think about it, but it's the sad truth. It's the elephant in the room.
Sad truth.
It's the elephant in the room, dude.
Well, so this is the part where I would challenge that, and I'll tell you why. Is that well, not challenge that necessarily in that you're wrong, but say that it's maybe not as easy as they think it is, because anyone that's actually sat down and played with vape carts and played with different terpene ratios knows that you can get all kinds of weird reactions when you start mixing and matching cannabinoid and terpene ratios.
There's no terps in this. This is a non-terp.
Oh, I know.
This stuff.
Oh, I know. I'm not talking about for people
Like
that
are.
Sorry.
I'm not talking about people that are interested in monomolecular pharmacology. I'm talking about a lot of the fact of the cannabis works is the fact that the synthesis of all the different compounds working in unison together. In
Oh,
particular,
dude, I'm with you. I'm with you.
so when they try to replicate that with these individual sources, when you mix them in a petri dish, or you mix them in glassware, they emulsify, they crystallize, they do all kinds of different things that are weird and kooky. And yes, you eventually can work it out. And maybe I'm thinking it's more complicated than it is, but I've certainly done a lot of work with, about 60 different terpenes mixing and matching. And I'll tell you what, we did a whole lot of batches that screwed up.
Man, no, the terps are that's what it's all about, man. I mean, THC is THC. You can have a 10% THC Afghan or a 10% THC Thai plant. They don't look, smell, or taste or feel anything alike, The THC is incidental to it almost. It's sort of like...
the THC and the levels, I think, Steve, are the ones that give us that little like skippy happy high because we just smoked a fucking sativa.
Oh man, the terps are what lifts it,
So I know it's terps, but I don't think it's terps that much. I think the dab brigade are getting into it way too fucking much.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what hit me this year. Go ahead.
Steve, I tug my fucking forelock to you, dude. You do way more than I do, and I will listen to your opinion.
No.
So what? No, come on, dude. That's totally fucking true. So what have you been
I'll tell you what blew
finding
me away
out this year, dude?
What blew me away this year in consideration of terps versus cannabinoid potency was I went around my favorite rows of plants at one point this year, and I call it, it's not like dirty hand trim off my hands. I call it ghosting, where I ghost my hands over the most resinous plants that are my favorite. And I just touched like the bottom of the fans, but these are fans with resin, but I'm not squeezing the buds. I'm not getting pistils on my hands. Anything that's not resin gets picked off. I start with them really clean. I don't wear gloves. And if I have any peeling skin on my hand, I wouldn't do it. If I've got a really clean hand at the time, then I will do it. I'm sure I'm not getting a pile of skin because I get an absolute thin glistening layer left when I'm done that's not raw skin, So I love ghosting my hands over and getting that fresh charas off of that. And I'm telling you, the first day, absolutely psychedelic, but oily with terps. And if I leave that same piece out, and I did this, I made a beautiful finger of it this year that was, the first day was psychedelic, man. And it was so strong. And I'm sorry. And I made a little hash joint up with a few little heads in it, much less hash than I would normally put, but I put a little hash through this joint because I'm like, this is going to be strong because the bud was exceptionally strong that I was doing it from. The outdoor bud on the equator from strong strains, there's nothing like it. It just rings the bell. But
so what was it? What was it?
That was a couple ones I rubbed, and they were a few out of the Sin City section. I had about 17 Sin City varieties in this one block, and the Slimer cookies I really liked. It was one of the most resistant plants. Like the mites didn't like it. I had mites on rows beside it and nothing on it.
Yeah.
So there was different. It was unbelievable, actually.
No, nice.
But it was actually probably the strongest bud of the lot too. Like I was really properly high from a couple of those selections, but they were fairly uniform plants. Like there wasn't a lot of variation in them. I was really impressed.
I found out from our plant that she likes to come up to you and go like, just get together here, bitch. You're going to be okay. And I have my favorites. I've got my favorites of all my plants. But they're still like mind-blowingly way better than anybody else's fucking plants in history. And they can all go fuck themselves. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
Well, give me a sec here, Rob. The point was they come down the first day, the terp-rich charas, absolutely ripping. Couldn't feel my legs from the knees down. Like I felt like floating 2 feet off the ground. Just my feet were numb. My face was melting. I was like, I haven't been this fucking high from a joint in a long time. And I couldn't believe how strong it was. But the next day I'd get up and roll one. And I'd let it sit out all night. I didn't even wrap it up and put it away. I just left it on my desk. The next morning I rolled one. I was like, hey, it's still really strong, but I'm not nearly as high. And then I put a piece of it away for a week. And then a friend was down and we went for a cruise and I rolled it up with him. And he hadn't, it was some of the best that he'd ever smoked. But already
we went for a cruise. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, and a nice ride in a bad part of town, let's say. But it was, he was blasted, of course, because it was some of the best hash he'd ever smoked. But I was like, fuck, this isn't as good as it was a week ago. And the THC hasn't changed dramatically. Like the cannabinoid content ratio hasn't changed dramatically yet.
No.
But the terps are gone. They're not gone, but let's say 80% gone, and the effect was that much less. And it was truly with the amount of terps, like I've found this so many times that if you have just straight distillate with no terps, you get a buzz. There's no undeniably, but it's nothing like if you add terps to it, like a solid dose, like you can dab terps on their own.
Come on, dude, we're just trying to do real weed. All my friends who are like backing up in here, listening to you because you're a fucking superstar and shut the fuck up.
Oh, shut up.
Okay.
You're killing
but
me.
you are.
Too much.
But you are. But you are. But they're all lining in here and just going like, we do this. We want to do this. We want to do this. They want to make the best fucking weed on the face of the fucking planet, and they happen to know that I know you. So that's quite good. So we'll have it, and I think you'll see them come across.
There's lots of people doing cannabis as well as I've ever.
There's lots of people doing cannabis too.
Right now, it's almost embarrassing because there's so many people doing it. I did it when it needed to be done because there wasn't a lot of people doing it.
Steve Dale is one of one of my personal fucking tug my forelock heroes.
So back in the day, I know the first time I heard of Breeder Steve was from overgrow.net. We talked about this back in the day. You were the first person to talk about anything with aquaponic cannabis. And I was working in a pet shop at the time, and we had a space to grow plants. We'll leave it at that. And we tried to basically replicate some of the stuff that you were doing way back in the late 90s. This is like
back in the 90s,
2000. Yeah. But you were the first person to post that, and it just happened to be because we already had lots of aquaponic, or it wasn't necessarily to do it aquaponics. We didn't even have a word aquaponics. We called it river tanks. That's what we called it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a word.
That's so funny. Right? It was the first thing I did when I moved to Vancouver. The first thing I did, because I'd wanted to set up a little 430 ag, the Sun Agros. I had a 430 watt. I said I want to get a little one light closet set up. I had a 1-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend when we moved to Vancouver and Kitsilano. And I went to a friend knew somebody with a grow store, and he knew I came out with like 5 pounds of bud that I grew outdoors in Ontario, and that was my personal stash.
Yeah,
exceptionally good. It was light years better than any indoor. So it was people in BC. I would share a joint with them. I wouldn't tell them where it's from, but I'd say, here, check this bud out here. We'll roll one up and smoke a joint, and they would be going, "Oh man, this BC hydro must be knocking you out. You just moved here from Ontario." And then as they smoked the joint, they'd get really quiet. And then 10 minutes later, they're like, "What fucking pot was that?" And I was like, "I brought that from Ontario. I grew up behind a cornfield." They're like, "That's outdoor." They couldn't believe it, right? Because BC outdoor pretty much sucks. So it was a real shock to the system for everybody when I brought that bud out here, so I could get anybody just off their tree with it. Because indoor is just a shadow of good outdoor, and
exactly.
of the best outdoor anyway. But But
I
this
thought it
one
was-
grow store, he liked my idea about the aquaponics. It was a friend of a friend, and he says, well, I want you to build me one of these aquaponic systems. And I wanted one, of course. So I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. I'll build you one, but it's going to cost you 2 of them, you know, because I'm building one to take home as well. So I got to go into this grow store, build them an aquaponic system, and then take all the pieces home with me to build mine. So I had my first one in the apartment there, and then set it up when I moved to that house where he was talking about in Shaughnessy, the compound. I set up the first. That was the first one I like took pictures of, and I look back. I've actually found some of the pictures from then, and recently when I was moving in the last few weeks, I found a box that had pictures from my original aquaponics grow store. So it had pictures of the first aquarium, well, the aquarium that was yours in that grow store. And so I'll find those and I'll share them with you.
Hell yeah, man. I'm working on I'll have my aquaponic cannabis book out here, hopefully Q1 next year or before 420 is the goal. But man, that'd be great maybe to see if you'd be up for letting us throw 1 or 2 of those in the book.
Oh, absolutely, man. No, total respect. I always meant to do a book on it, and I wrote a huge chunk of it, but I never finished it. I'm really glad you're getting the message out there, because it's really important, you know, that more people switch over from flushing newts down every Saturday morning to running an aquaponic system and just having better grass. Like if you do it right, it tastes great. If you don't, it tastes fishy. You know, the worst I've seen aquaponics done was people that overfed pellets. And they had so many pellets floating in the water because they would only go there once a week. And the bloody pot smelled like a bag of fish pellets, which is not an attractive smell. Like it's like making pellet tea and feeding your plants pellet tea, you know? They soak up what they're sitting in, and they smell like what they're fed. I had a friend show up at my, it was actually a new friend at the time, a friend of a friend, and it was the first time we'd met. And he showed up at my apartment when I was going to university in Ottawa many moons ago. And he had a backpack with a pound of weed to show me. And he showed up in my apartment. And before he opened his backpack, I said, do you grow with fish emulsion? And the guy looked at me like he was just reaching in to pull the bags out. And he hadn't pulled them out yet, you know? And he's like, why the fuck did you say that? And I said, because I know that smell. One of my friends always did that. And it smells funny in the weed. And he says, we bury a fish in every hole. And I just laughed. I was like, it shows, man. But we became really good friends after that, because he just said, no, everybody's just looked at my bud and went, wow. And he says, you're the first guy who didn't even look at it and said, did you use fish to grow this? He was just sideways, you know?
That's the old Indian way. I've mentioned that they bury the fish in every hole.
Yeah, no, it absolutely grows your robust plant. But you gotta like the smell of fishy weed.
Sorry. I didn't want to be politically incorrect, so I had to say Native American.
No. Roger, Steve is like, he's a master.
Oh, I know who Steve is.
Master of the highest order, and there ain't no fucking...
Dude, I'm just a stoner like the rest of you, for sure. That's it.
You were talking about...
But we're all conscientious stoners, let's say, you know? We really like what we do.
We love the weed. We
love what we do. And you know, the plant's never going to lose its appeal for people that have that aesthetic attachment to it. And it's more, you know, more than, runs deeper than that, to like a spiritual attachment to it. You know, it's such an amazing species, and it's as much an earthling as humans. And it's insane that there's some humans that think they have the right to make it extinct. They can eat my ass, you know? And I just can't believe it, you know, it's such a beautiful flower, and there's one for everybody. You know, there's so much variation within cannabis. It's just beautiful.
Boom Shiva.
Amen.
Amen. Bumbalay. Come on, man. Fuck them. Fuck them all.
Well, I gotta say, to Robbie, Division's To Vision's credit, he is a long-term committed grower and a serious collector and aficionado of the plant. And he's a very kind and generous friend. And he'd offered me, he has like 400 lines of living plants saved that he said, anytime I'm ready to start up in Canada, to come down and help myself. So, I mean, with friends like that, how can you lose, right? It's all the support we get that helps us along the way. Like every plant I ever had, somebody developed before me, and somebody developed before them. And
hang on a sec, Steve. What the
we stand on the shoulders
am I
of
going to
giants.
do with that?
You know, when people say, "Oh, it's a new industry, and we're going to develop these new varieties," and it's like, do you know how many millennia farmers have been saving those seeds for you to get there? You know, it's like we have to be humbled. The history of that plant is the history of humanity, man.
Just caring fucking human beings out there who sit there and just go like, so what you got? What you got? Oh, do you want to smoke this weed? Excellent. That's nice. Okay, I'll smoke some of that fucking weed. And I'll smoke some of that fucking weed. And that's an inch off the weed I'm smoking in the moment. But it still doesn't matter that we cannot let them take away our shit. Okay, like they're trying to fucking legalize us and make us like criminals at the same time, and I cannot.
This is the problem, you know. We are nothing but a herd to be milked, and that is all, and that is it. And we had the freedom to, when it was totally illegal, it was so unregulated because it was illegal. Once it becomes regulated, you create joinder with the system, or the shitstem, if you will. So I mean,
I can't do it. You know,
it's painful. It's painful. I've struggled with it myself, and I tell you, man, it's painful.
Yeah. To circle back too, so the USDA is committed to issuing the final rulings expeditiously after reviewing public comments and obtaining additional information during the initial implementation. The interim final rule will be in effect for 2 years, then be replaced with a final ruling. So, you know, if they don't set this with these new CBD regs, which is where we were starting off at with when we started off in this direction, you know, that's going to completely cripple the current CBD market and force everyone into either the GMO seeds or CBG.
No,
and
it's gonna cripple the fucking weed market, dude.
Well, so you already see. I mean, look at places like we've had numerous people on from red states that are growing just CBD and getting $2,000-$3,000 a pound all day long. And you have a lot of people that have invested, you know, taken out huge loans to scale up equipment for the next few years.
Illusion. That's all a fucking the worst illusion you could ever invest in.
I know that, but what I'm saying is that you have thousands and thousands and thousands
of idiocy at the worst fucking level. Jesus.
Okay, hold on a second. So you have thousands and thousands of farmers that have gone and invested in huge amounts in order to get this out there and to get their you know, their seed stock, their equipment, all this other things, and build out long-term plans. And now they don't have any access to stock, or the seed that is available is going to be astronomically high, or they're going to have to switch to CBG, which now you're seeing the price of CBG seed quadruple or more, you know, in the last week, you know, or higher now, if there's any available even, you know, good luck trying to find some, because everyone immediately switched to that. And you're also seeing money, you know, get sucked right out of those markets in the United States and going right overseas. You know, you're seeing a lot more investment in Europe and Africa and South America because people are just sick of it in North America right now. And they're sick of all the craziness and they're sick of putting in money and then having these regulatory stuff just totally, you know, screw with them. I mean, if you look at Oklahoma, they just now have a whole new licensing system for renewals for next year. Most people are not going to be able to even keep their license. You know, a lot of these guys are totally zoned out of where they're currently at, and these people have huge investments. You know what? That's not fair to them. you know,
It's
and they're
not fair at all. At the very least, like I said earlier, they should, I don't know that they'll get it, but they should at least lobby to use the stock they're holding, because in any other business, if you're holding stock that you were licensed to use this year and you expected to be able to use it next year, and they move the goalposts on you, they should say, okay, well, after you use up the seed you're holding, you've got to find tighter seed. But you shouldn't be blocked from using inventory that you're holding already. That's just bad business.
It all should be grandfathered in exactly like that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't always mean it is.
They have to lobby hard for that, because
Yeah.
that's their livelihood and they're sitting on that stock. If you're sitting on stock that you were allowed to use this year, you should be allowed to use
Yeah.
it next year and then replace it maybe. Unless you had 5 years worth, in which case you should be able to grow it for the next 5 years.
Yep.
But
Yep.
because you're holding that inventory when it was legal.
That's basically
So-
grandfather. Yeah, same as the grandfather.
So this is the other part of this hemp bill that's really fucked up. And again, this was on the Oregon CBD seeds. Thanks, guys, for putting together such a wonderful paper. And we're actually going to have a lawyer on Thursday. We're going to have Ann. Hold on a second, make sure I get her name right. Ann Kelson will be joining us from McAllister and Garfield. She's also counsel on the Kelson Law Group. She'll be joining us as well to talk to us about that, and then we're hopefully going to have Dale Hunt on either with her or on the episode. But more than likely, we're just going to have him on the following Thursday, as I'll be traveling next Tuesday. So I'm excited to have that. Actually, you know what? He might even be on Tuesday, because I'll be back in time to do the show on normal time. So, but here's the deal: so that all cannabis under the new program would have to be tested via a DEA registered analytical laboratory. Okay, so you think, oh well, that's not a huge deal, right? These guys could just get it. All existing labs would be currently that are doing all state testing would be prohibited, as though they've been operating in violation of federal law. So all of those would be banned. There would not be a single one that's a current laboratory that would be allowed to operate in under the new rules. So basically they'd put every single testing lab out of business that's been operating since day one, legally.
So we'll have no expert labs. They'll have all these new labs they spring up probably with the government backing and stuff.
Let me
Yeah.
get this straight. You guys all thought they were legalizing cannabis for our benefit.
I didn't.
I'm spelling it out just to let people understand it, you know.
It's painful, dude. It's never in the interest of the people. You know, it really isn't.
But Steve does make a point about having people understand where it's at and where it's going.
Absolutely, no, absolutely, no. I'm not really picking on you. I'm just being facetious, right?
I
It's
doubt
just-
very seriously, Steve, that you walk around with your face in your phone all day. You know,
So
Too
the
much, too much.
pilots, any states that have been operating under the pilot program would have to transition to the USDA rules by the 31st of October of next year. So if you could pull off a crop before then and unload it before then you could somehow potentially grow that next year.
Oh yeah, well, most people can get off before October 31st.
But when are they going to start enforcement of that 0.5 for prosecution? That they could decide to do that early, and
I don't know. It's all beyond my comprehension.
that's what's really messed up too. It's not the fact that it's just going to be denied and you lost it. They're going to prosecute you because somehow it's a plant. It's not like
It's crazy.
From
I can't believe we're still even having to talk about this. It's so sad. It's that they can't just ignore it for once. Just leave us alone. It's a fucking herb.
Well, they've done the testing that they always lied about. That was the whole thing.
Well, and not only that too, it's awkward for consultants too, right? So I've had multiple projects in Oklahoma that I was working with that I've had to back out of because the client wasn't taking compliance seriously, and you can't be involved with that. And
No.
you know, especially when you have an ever evolving thing and their lawyer says one thing and you're saying another and this, that, and the other. It's like, look, one of the two of us has done weed a long time. You have to abide by the law. Your federal protections only protect you if you abide by state law. So you can't, you know, you can't violate that, or you're risking going to federal jail or state jail. You know, it's not
Neither
worth
one sounds attractive, does it?
Exactly. So it sucks a lot of times too, even be working on the level that all of us work on. You know, you end up working with some of the stuff and then suddenly someone can't be compliant and then you're out of a deal too, you know. So uh because of zoning or whatever. So, and sometimes it's not even an intentional thing, you know, sometimes it's you know, some kind of other problem, you know, it doesn't
No,
necessarily
that's true.
it was
That's
malicious,
true.
you know.
No, it's a minefield, you know, opening a cannabis business.
Yep.
And you know, any business is, but a cannabis business times 10, right? It's
Oh, especially, and then you got the 1080, you know, the 1080E tax stuff and all the other fun things that when you're operating in the United States that you have to account for. And you know, a lot of people don't know how to navigate that and structure their company right, so they end up paying, you know, astronomically high taxes. And you
well,
know,
yeah, the taxes is a whole
You
other
know,
story. You're not allowed to write off any expenses and stuff too, right?
right, so you
honestly,
have to
we
make a
don't care.
management.
I know Steve cares because Steve has got a fucking winery and he cares about the expenses because he has to pay them.
I
He has
used
to
to.
pay them.
Yeah,
Boom
so you,
fucking Shiva, okay. But I'm still one of the nice guys who just goes like, let's go and grow some nice fucking weed.
so you have to set up
So
everything
what have we got?
with a
So like
management company and
we've
the
had
whole
we've had some
nine.
good stuff in the last few years. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you're right,
What
man. Vision, it does suck the light out of it, playing by
I
the
know
book.
it sucks the fucking
I
light
know,
out
but
of
it's
it.
just
I can't let that happen. I've got
I
to
don't
make
blame you, man. I don't
I've
blame
got
you
to
one
make
bit.
better I've got to make better weed. And it's that fucking simple. I have to make better fucking weed.
It's a lifelong drive, brother. You can never
Yeah,
make the best. You always want to make better, right? And you
I
make
know,
great weed now.
I
Like
know,
really,
brother.
there's
That's the
nobody
thing.
growing better weed than Vision. He grows it
You're
as
just
good as
going like,
anybody can. You know? But yeah,
so you know, a lot of people don't know about, you have to structure it with the, you know, separating everything and having your management companies and having everything split up in the right ways and structuring them all. And you know, but some countries, you know, you can apply for things like B Corp. You know, there are a handful of things, even B Corp corporations that can save you tax money and things like that. So it's just,
that's
if
cool.
you don't know that and you haven't worked with anything or worked with companies that are operating, you don't know all this stuff. And this is a lot of the people where people don't even get a chance to grow their super amazing weed legally. They end up getting caught and, you know, sit and spin wheels because they don't get a chance to actually, you know, get through that. So
Wild. Wild.
but anyways, I'm sure you and I could sit here and complain about licensing for a long time. And
Oh
it's
God,
funny that
I swear the thing was I was spoiled because I saw it when it was okay in Switzerland when they had it, that it was just a non-issue, and I thought when everywhere's like this, life will go back to normal, you know. But they just can't let it go, so they say yeah it's legal, but you know here's your phone book of regulations, and if you screw up, that's it. You're in just as much trouble as when it was illegal. It's just too much, you know?
Here's your hot plate. Now jump up on it and let's see you dance.
Yeah, that's it. Anyways,
yeah,
it's
I think
at some point, you know, we all have our point where we're gonna say, fuck it, I gotta learn to dance to their tune, you know. But maybe not all the time, but at least enough to have something in that realm, you know?
absolutely. And so I thought on that note I'd ask you, so how many types of cannabis do you know could pass this 0.3% decarboxylation limit?
But I have no idea. I've never quantified those numbers. I
You know,
know in
it's
Canada that's the cutoff, and they have an approved list, but it doesn't cover everything that falls into that.
but
And it's a pretty short
it's
list.
crazy.
And there's nothing really high. Like you don't get any 20% CBD up, you know. You maybe get 12 to 16 if you're lucky. and most
Mhm.
people are probably working with 6 or 7 in CBD with approved Canadian hemp strains, which have to be under. The first one that we started working with in CBD down south was a cherry pie out of Colorado that is almost 11%. The piece that was tested at the lab was 10.98% CBD and zero point 0.1 THC. No, sorry, 0.01 THC. Because we're allowed, no, I'm still now. It was 0.1. We're allowed 1% THC, it was 0.1. So even in Canada, that plant would pass because Canada's 0.3, but you have to get approved as a hemp breeder in Canada before you're allowed to produce hemp seeds here. And that's not even a strictly governmental process. They have a Hemp Breeders Alliance or something like this. I forget what it's called, but they have a private group that is pretty much a cartel of hemp seed producers in Canada, and they're not really open to new members. And so that was kind of a surprise because I thought it would just be a licensing thing, but that's hemp, that's not cannabis. Cannabis, that's not an issue, but you still need a license. But but from Colombia, as we've registered this selection, that's basically 11 CBD and 0.1 THC, that one will get out into the wider world. But we've also got some other stuff that's 20 and up CBD, but it might be over 1, it might be 2% THC. So it's a matter of crossing that with the 0.1 and getting something that stays under 1, but still stays over 20, you know? And at the same time, do the same thing with the CBDV, which is just more of a niche, you know, whether we sell those genetics or just use them for production. If the whole world's got CBD, it's better to be one of the guys making CBDV, presumably, right? So, because it'll catch on with the CBD crowd, like you won't have to explain much, right? So there'll be a slight differentiation. It'll be the new CBD, and I think that's kind of fun.
Plus,
Just
I think
because it's not my
many,
main interest. My main interest is sensory. I really like the aromas and the smell, you know, the flavor. To me, that's the main interest. The fact that it's good medicine is a bonus, you know, but still, I'll always breed with my nose. I'll still select chemovars for their potency, and, you know, I'll reluctantly do it if there's smells I don't like, but I will do it. But that's the job at this point. But really, I'm there to breed for my nose. And if I wasn't doing selections for aroma, I wouldn't do it. I just want to show up to smell the roses for a few weeks and taste them. That's it, you know? I really like to find them, find the winners from high numbers of wide variety of stuff. I like to mix them up and follow them out a few paths and guide them down different routes and have some fun with them that way. But really, it's always about smelling and tasting it, you know? And that is my greatest reward in working with cannabis. And it'll always be that way. Like if I could just do it as a hobby breeder and I didn't need a job and a license to do it all, the problem is once you need a license, now you need, you know, employees and experts and lawyers, and, you know, it just becomes a corporation faster than it needs to be if you just want to breed cannabis. Like if I just wanted to have a breeding station in different altitudes and latitudes all over the world and could do it as a hobby, I might never make it a company. I would do it for the joy of it, you know? But the fact is, the only way you can do that these days is with licenses. And to have licenses, you have to have the company. And to have the company, you got to have, you know, a lot more than we're used to for doing this. To grow a field of weed to me means, great, I'm going to hire 2 guys for the summer. We're going to go to work, you know? And now it's like, no, I need 6 lawyers and 4 accountants and 3 fundraisers and 2 marketing people. And it's just, you know, the reporting and all that and the applying for every move you make. It's just like, You're really challenging me to want to keep doing this on an official level, because the official level is, inefficient. And that's what's painful about it, is because, in a given lifetime, you can do X amount of generations. And anytime you're sitting on the sidelines for want of a signature or a stamp, it's just like, do I swallow the pistol or point it at them? I don't know. I'm just so sick of it sometimes. So you tell me. I don't know what the right way to go is. And sometimes I think, it'd be fun just to go somewhere you're not supposed to do it and do it without anybody knowing again. That was so
Right.
easy.
My
That was so
buddy,
easy.
my my buddy had a private little place in Panama. It was an old like a hotel or something. He inherited it, and he was just like, dude, let's just set it up as like a private weed thing. And it was super tempting, but it was just like,
Yeah, if
nah.
you're not connected in Panama, it'd be a real shitty prison to spend time in, that's for sure.
Yeah, that too.
But
So
I had the funniest story of somebody that went for the foreign money like that. He was a Dutch guy that he was a refugee in Canada from a hash trial where they sunk a boat coming back from Morocco with like 40 tons of hash on it or something. And he was working in a grow store in Vancouver, and he was just crazy as the day is long in the summer. And he was funny as shit, but he ended up going to Japan and said, some Japanese people that came to Vancouver were like, "Oh, it's like $100 a gram in Japan. You should come and grow." So he went back with them, and they went out to some little town in the country, and he got the house in the country, and I think he plugged in like 8,000 watts or something, and it blew the whole town's electricity. So they found him in like 6 hours after he plugged in the lights. And he was so crazy, they said, "We don't even want to keep you. Just go back to Canada." And they just sent him back. But he was a nutter for sure.
so do you have any advice for people that are looking at some of the international stuff that's available? There's lots of different projects all over the place. I know
It's
I'm
hard
working
to
in
keep
Africa.
up with. You were mentioning all the possibilities in Africa right now, and that alone is more than you can shake a stick at.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, wherever you feel like you want to spend your time is where you should do it. And
No, grow some fucking land race then. Go to
yeah,
the
wherever you
country.
want. But I
Go
mean,
to
if
the
you want to
country.
do it in Thailand, you
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
it in
No,
Thailand. But it's hard. Right now in
like, just
Thailand,
go
I
to
have
the
one
country
friend.
you want to go to, find the fucking weed you want to find, bring it back out, and then start to breed with it and do us all a favor.
Well,
Thank you very much.
I'm
You
literally
know what?
looking like you're saying with the land race, growing Durban with some of the Western growth methodologies, but with the terroir,
Exactly. Yeah.
from the native terroir, and really
Sure.
seeing what the genetics
I
are
don't give a
capable
shit
of.
That's what
about
it
the
is. That's what
native
people don't
terroir.
understand. This
All
is
we
like,
need is that thing kept so that
Go ahead, Steve.
if people want local hydro, that's up to them, but they should be choice. You got to think of it like the world of wine. If you said you can only drink California wine, but you can't buy French or Australian, you'd be pissed. You'd say, "What the fuck is that? I can't buy French wine." It's up to you. You should be. We're earthlings. The countries are legal fictions that are just bloody tax farms to milk us as the herds we are, and that's what we are to them. And the fact is, cannabis is a global thing, and it's from Siberia to the equator, right? Like it's amazing. It really belongs on the planet as much as we do, and it should thrive, and we should interact, and there's a lot to be gained, and it's a joy. God bless it. Not that I believe in God, but just as a turn of phrase.
But Steve, you were just trying to talk about doing the indigenous kind of like the
Oh yeah, just
terroir, but using your modern different methods than they've ever seen over there, right?
well, yeah, and just accelerating that too. I know, like I was looking at, we're working on a project. I'm working on a project right now in Zimbabwe, and just they can still use paraquat on some stuff in their country, and like some other stuff that's been banned in the United States, at least for general stuff, for quite a while. So, and having to worry about that, because you don't know if you're working on a project unless you do soil samples. If they had been spraying, who the hell knows what that could be latent in that soil.
So scary.
And hemp and cannabis is such a good bioaccumulator. Before you even think about a project, any of these third world countries, or not necessarily third world, but foreign countries, you have to make sure you're doing really detailed soil sampling and sending it out of country. Canada actually has wonderful sampling labs, and that can do it. And then the other labs I would recommend stateside would be MMI labs, and then J.R. Peters. Both are great in the United States for people that are interested. But making sure you do all that stuff before you take on an agreement, or have some kind of stipulation where if it doesn't pass those, that it doesn't go forward.
That's a great point, Steve. And the other thing is, even heavy metals that are totally innocuous, that aren't pollutants, they're just regional. I've seen that disqualify stuff.
In Australia, I've actually seen on 3 separate occasions people with aquaponic systems in Australia with well water that had uranium or radium water in their water.
Radon's off gas from the uranium. Yeah, it's common in the Okanagan Valley too, in BC actually. Radon.
In Pennsylvania, I grew up in Philadelphia, and radon is really common, and they have to have air pumps in all the basements for that reason.
I've seen places out here in the interior of BC, but also at a first farm in Colombia, where it's downstream from where there's lots of copper deposits. And so they have abnormally high copper levels, but it's not in the toxic range. So it's not a problem, but they're abnormally high copper levels.
I think it goes to say that if you're by a river or any kind of lake or kind of watery region, or anywhere else, you really need to do soil samples before you put a big grow in or start a big grow up.
You know what? Rainwater is fucking toxic. Like I remember in the 70s or something doing projects on acid rain. Like it's not a new phenomenon. The water that falls from the sky isn't clean. Like that's the world we live in. On some level, they got to back off,
Well, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I think on that note, we've had quite the episode. I don't want to hold everybody the whole night. I think we'll wrap things up. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and tell us all about what you've been up to. Talk about the international market. We really haven't had a lot of people that can come on and talk with it from experience, especially on the scale that you do. You really are doing one of the largest grows on the planet. So it's really cool to have you on.
It's going to be really interesting next year. And I look forward to, I invite all of you to come and visit any of my projects and join me on a trip sometime. It's a fucking hoot. We'll have a good time.
Yeah, I'll try to take you up on that one day.
That'd be beautiful.
Yeah, man, it would. I thank you for inviting all of us.
Yeah, we got 2 new places we're getting started one in the south of Spain and one in the south of Portugal that are quite close to each other, like hours apart by car. And nice. It's really a question of almost playing one off against the other as we go through the licensing process and just see which is the most restrictive. And so far, Portugal's the most welcoming. So if anybody's looking for somewhere to go, I would say, from my experience this year, one of the most promising places is rural Portugal, because they have, plenty of EU incentives even for R&D projects and creating local industry, because they're the poorest parts of their countries. So you go to the landlocked rural places in Spain and Portugal, and the municipalities will put somebody on your file to help you work through the application because they want the business there. So you've got to take advantage of them when you can, because they take advantage of you more than you ever will of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. All right. Well, Thanks a lot again for joining us. How do people find you and learn more about the projects you're working on?
I haven't been doing much to keep updated online, but I've got the Breeder Steve Instagram, at O Cannabis Inc., at Medcan Cole, Medcan Peru, or I think it's Medcan P. Those are probably on Twitter and Instagram. And I put up a website, breedersteve.com, but I don't think I've looked at it in a year since I put it up. So I should probably get on there and update it somewhat. Sorry to say.
Yeah, it helps if that's the whole point of putting up a website, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that is. You know what? I got that domain because somebody contacted me and says, "You don't own this domain. You're stupid. You gotta get that domain." And I was like, "Okay." So I got the domain, and then you get the domain, and it gives you the website builder for $10 or whatever. And
Oh yeah.
you're like, "Okay, well, I'll just upload 6 pictures and make it a placeholder for now and come back to it." And never did. But I think I will do that. I've actually, now that I've crossed winemaking off my list this fall, I made my last vintage this fall, and it's not done fermenting, but I'm not looking after it anymore.
What do you mean you crossed it off the fucking list?
I sold the winery last week, man.
I know, dude, but dude, like, I was waiting for your last year's outdoor, like personal fucking tasting.
Well, when you come up, you can try some for sure. Don't worry, they still let me go there too. Don't worry.
I'm coming up to fucking get that shit. Okay.
Yeah, man.
Well,
we've got some wine to drink.
Hopefully, I can cross paths with you before I take off for Africa in the next few weeks. So,
yeah, not, man, and I really envy your trip to Africa, and I wish you really the best. That's going to be awesome, and there's so much amazing genetics to sift through over there.
Well,
and you're the man to do it, man. You'll be fine. You'll have a great time, and you'll do good work. I have no doubt.
I already have we're gonna be doing our own little version of Strain Hunters, basically. When we get over there,
a slightly more intelligent one, no doubt.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not. Anyway,
as long as you keep me out of it, you'll be fine. And Robbie.
Sorry, Steve. I'm going to be taking you there, getting actually drunk as a fucking skunk, stoned out of your gourd, and going like, "What the fuck's happening now?" I don't know. Apparently, we're about to find a new strain.
So, yeah, it'll be fun.
That's my mission tonight.
So we're gonna end up doing a trip. We actually have some stuff loosely lined up already for when I get boots on the ground. We have a couple of different people that have been working. Actually, you know who it is that grows most of the cannabis in Africa? It's not the men, it's the women. The women are the biggest growers and the longest growers. They're the ones that actually, pay the bills and run the household and get shit done. So we're actually 2 different women that are actually going to be taking me on some trips to visit a couple of different areas where they've been traditionally a bit of That's going to be a lot of fun. One trip in Malawi and then one trip up in Zimbabwe, but Zimbabwe to start off with until Malawi gets a little more chill. But yeah, so that'll be fun, and then and that's going to be happening here in December or January, probably the second half of December.
Well, if they don't arrest you, I'll come for a visit.
Well, that's fine. The with the dreads and all. Just
if dreadlocks can pull it off, I'm coming. That's it.
Right. Well, it's funny in Jamaica, I didn't get harassed anywhere near as much as some of the other people I was with that looked all clean cut and because
they didn't think you had any money. That's why.
Exactly. Oh, so that's always fun.
Yeah, fuck. I tell you, man, it's always a trip going back to somewhere nowadays when you're used to, like, okay, now at least for the last year in Canada, you can stand on the sidewalk smoking a joint and you're no longer a criminal.
No.
So even if it's not perfect, that's right. Right? That's right. That's a step in the right direction, right? So when I go to other places, like earlier this year, I was in England for a week and then in Spain. And I was smoking on restaurant patios, smoking big gaggers, and people around me are looking at me like, this isn't Amsterdam, you know? And I'm like, I don't care.
I know, but they're English. They're
Yeah,
English and they're
but they wanted some, but they're like,
polite.
you know, this isn't Amsterdam, right? I've never sat on a patio in a restaurant in England and smoked a joint. And they would pass it with me.
As long as they can tell you the law, they're quite happy with just telling you the law, and then the rest of it, they just go like,
yeah, then they're like, pass it over, you know. But everybody was astounded that I had the temerity to light pot in public there.
Fuck you, Steve. Like, fuck
it was a
you.
good time.
Like, you should be able to smoke the shit out of whatever you.
Oh, we had a great time though, and it was really fun because the friend that gave me the pot showed up from another part of England, but he was an old spice grower, and he used to come and visit me in Switzerland and get seeds and cuttings and whatnot. So he had all kinds of great stuff. And really, it was I probably had the best stash in England for the week I was there, and it was a hoot. But still, I actually ran into more good pot in England this time than I saw. I saw some other people's. Usually, the stuff I've seen in the UK has been really sad. And this trip, I was genuinely surprised that I had, you know, a number of random people I met even at a pot show had respectable bud that tasted good and smoke burned clean.
I know, but
like,
I've been getting the guys to bring me the garbage from the fucking dispensaries, and it's fucking garbage. It literally is just.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure what most people have is garbage. I was just lucky enough to get some good stuff, but I was repeatedly lucky this trip and really had some tasty things, as well as some amazing Persian opium and some great hash made from Belgium.
I like the Persian opium as well.
Oh man, that was a treat. I hadn't had any in a long time.
That was a treat. Yeah,
it left me a little gibbled because it was in the afternoon and I had an event that night. I had a hard time finding it.
I lived in Turkey as a child, and we used to ride from the town to the Air Force base through the poppy fields. You know.
Yeah. No, it's the same. It's a sacred plant. They're all useful.
Yeah,
they just have the potential for abuse, but that doesn't mean you can't use them. You know, alcohol is a potential for abuse, and tons of things do. But most people can handle them. You know.
Yeah. Most people don't realize how prevalent it was, though. It grew everywhere. You know.
Oh, that's right. And that's the thing. It's one of the easiest things to grow. It has no pests. You don't get mites. You don't get mold. You don't get anything. You know, and it's done in the middle of the summer, and nobody's looking for it. So, if people are torn on growing grass anymore, grow some poppies.
Alrighty. So, what about you, Roger? How do people find you?
Hey, well, I'm at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com, and you can catch me occasionally on Facebook or Instagram if you find Roger Latewood, and that's about it right now. We got to working a little bit on getting our well, here I'm another one guilty, but it's a small operation. We're getting our greenhouse hemp farm going. We're working on a greenhouse this Friday, start back up with some help again, and so I'm really excited about that. And I'm getting a rooster tomorrow, I think. So that's about it for me. You know, that's we're having some semi-freezing to freezing nights this week. For the last year, we only had 3 all year, actual freezing nights, and we're going to have 5 out of 6 nights in the low 30s this week. So I all of a sudden kind of farted around and didn't do much, and now got to worry about all my trees and banana plants and stuff like that. I got out there and cloth pots and, you know, kind of make a little shelter for them for the winter.
Where are you with banana plants?
Well, I'm in South Carolina and I just wanted some. So I got some.
Oh, cool.
I found a cool place. They sold me like a Myers lemon plant, a key lime plant, and a blood orange. I bought a blood orange. You got
right on. Those are all awesome.
Yeah, right. See, I like to cook too, but I like to eat crazy stuff like that, you know. But then I looked around and they had I got a passion fruit, and I got 2 dwarf banana plants. Of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I really quickly learned about it, and I read about it, and I talked to Steve about it, and the fact that they grow pups, and you just take them out of the pot and correctly dissect the pup from the mother plant, so to speak, and put it in a pot, and you got another banana plant.
You can square cut the stems. I'm sure Steve's seen this. You can square cut the stems and they'll pop from the trunks.
Well,
Oh, I never really paid a lot of attention to them. The thing besides eating bananas and shooting them for target practice, I like the leaves.
well, they're really
The
good
leaves.
for you.
You know what? The leaves, when I was I was like 18, I took a winter and went to Central America. And in Belize, I was on the beach with some Rastas for a few weeks. And they would always, because you couldn't get rolling papers. And so they would, your choices were hollowing out a cigarette and smoke shitty white paper, or rolling them in almond leaves or banana leaves. And you find the bananas shed the leaves, and then at the bottom you see brown leaves, and underneath them they're gray, and the gray ones are a little too brittle and they'll break. You end up finding the right tan color that works every time, and they're like a blunt wrap. And because you got those fibrous strings on them, you rip off a couple of those and you roll up a nice cigarette with three
Yeah,
bow
I can see
ties
what
on it.
you're looking
Hold
for
it
it
shut.
almost to be perfectly like almost it's curing on the stem, or so to speak, kind of.
Honestly, after a month of smoking out of banana leaves and almond leaves, papers tasted harsh. I got used to them. I got used to smoking banana leaves and almond leaves.
Now you're gonna drive me crazy with trying to figure that out about with my little banana plants.
You're gonna have to roll some with your banana leaves. I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
Well,
You'll cut them up the shape you want.
I didn't want to go here too, but allegedly this is some Congo right here, and it's funny we had this surprise guest tonight, and this is some of your Congo here, buddy, from one of our good Earth friends.
I think he's talking to you, Vision.
Yeah, I know. Well, whatever. I don't care.
How many bottles of wine have you had tonight, Vision?
It doesn't matter. Like I'm happy with Steve. Steve's a fucking wine owner. He and I wine, smoke fucking mad weed, and go like, what the fuck just happened just then?
So what about you, Vision?
I wish you were here, man.
I know, man. But we're both exactly the same fucking people, because I just sit there and I would just be sitting at the side, just going like, what are we doing now? Like,
it's the first time I've seen you with a beard, though. I can say that.
Oh no, but I carve it off every little once in a while. So like, then apparently all the girls think I look sexy. So like, hey, you look sexy now, like or whatever.
Are you still seeing that one that told you to pull her hair?
Yes, I'm still saying that one.
We'll save that for the after show.
Yeah.
I love like. I've hung out at Steve's place. Steve's place is like probably the best fucking weed place on the face of the planet. It's
come on.
There's an enormous amount of wine, which is fucking great.
There was at least.
All right.
Which is fucking
So
great.
How do people find out more about you, Vision, if they want to follow you? Or
I don't want them to follow me. He
hides out.
I don't care. It's not I don't care.
You guys
said that too. He's consistent. He's always said, I don't want people to fucking find me.
No, I don't want people to find me. I really don't.
Sorry.
So no, you're fine. You guys can find me at Ponics, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, on any of your favorite podcast apps. I'm trying to play a little catch up on some of the other stuff. I'm gonna work on at some point in the next few weeks getting the blog back up and running and trying to get that all up and going, and maybe even overhaul the website again. I found an easier tool to do that. So playing a little bit of catch up, having a little more free time than I have had a little more than a while, and a little more and a little less in some ways. And then yeah, so if you guys are interested, we'll be back on Thursday, and we'll be talking about different lawyer issues, a big breakdown on California and a bunch of other stuff going on. We'll and then on Tuesday or Thursday of next week, hoping to have Dale Hunt on to break down the USDA stuff, and then hoping to have Harvey Smith on soon from MBK Universities. He's always a great educator. So we will talk to you guys soon. And thanks everybody for watching. Thanks again, Steve, for taking the time to join us and educate us.
Well, thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Awesome info, man. Awesome.
Heck yeah. And
Great, man. You have a great night.
you too. Cheers. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. We'll catch you guys on Thursday.